Welcome back to another episode of the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by FanDuel. Ladies and gentlemen, it is game week. Now, before we dive into everything, look, guys, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you are subscribed to this channel. Make sure that notification bell is hit because we're going to have a lot of content coming your way. It's been 218 days since we've watched Notre Dame play a football game. We only have to wait 5 more days for the 2025 season to kick off. So the best way to stay in tune with everything we're doing, you see it scrolling down there at the bottom of the screen. Make sure that you are subscribed and you are a member of the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Now, ahead of this season, Brian's rolling out a whole bunch of film breakdowns. Right now, he has a bunch of run game breakdowns on the message board. I was watching the Inside Zone breakdown before Marcus Freeman's press conference started, which is something we're going to talk about today. You can only find that on the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Brian, it is game week, man. It feels great to be here.
Did inside zone, did duo, did mid zone, did counter. And then I'll have some pass game stuff coming up this week too. So, yeah, it was, it was a lot. It's going to give us a great idea of what I think this team is going to be about. And, man, I can't wait. We're going to talk the press conference. We're going to talk what's at stake. We're going to dive into Miami. We're going to do a mailbag. So, hey, get your mailbag questions in too. One of the things we're going to do on this Tuesday show is we'll kind of have our 2 big topics, and then we'll do a mailbag at the end since we're not going to be doing weekly mailbags like we did before. So get those questions in, put an MB on there, a mailbag emoji, get those in, and we'll get them at the end of the show, man. But Trev, we got a lot to discuss for this week. It just still hasn't kind of sunk in yet with everything that's kind of going on the last week with Ange and just getting ready for it's like, wow, it's freaking game week, dude. Like, it's game week. Let's roll. And, I'm ready to go. I'm super fired up and ready to go.
It hit me this morning, man. I was letting Buck outside. It was like 60 degrees. Just felt good outside. Got back inside, had a bunch of notifications on my phone about, Marcus Freeman's press conference today. It's game week for Notre Dame. We're 5 days left until they kick off their season down in Hard Rock. But you did bring up something that we are going to talk about today. Marcus Freeman, literally about 12 minutes ago, just ended the first, really, I guess you could call it, installment of the game week press conferences this week. A lot of different things to cover, Brian. We're going to touch on some of the things that he spoke about today, starting with the first depth chart of the season was released. And there were some interesting little nuggets in there that I know that we wanted to talk about when we got the show started. Now, obviously, one of the biggest things on the depth chart, this was already announced before it was released, but it's also more confirmation to see it on paper. CJ Carr is listed as the number 1 quarterback on the depth chart for the Miami game. Marcus Freeman dove into a little bit of what all went into that process, Brian, and I know that we had some key takeaways there.
It was a interesting explanation as to what went into it. He talked about the statistics being different or similar. Trev, you and I discussed that. I kind of gave you some intel that I got on that one. And I just was kind of maybe expecting a little bit more rally behind CJ kind of comments. And I didn't think we got that at first. I think when he was asked later, I think it was Tim Priester asked him later about the intangibles. Then you saw Marcus Freeman kind of going off and saying a lot of positive things, but it was just like, it's like in his attempt to not like, and I kind of understand the line he's trying to toe here is, you don't want to make it seem like Kenny didn't do well, but that, by praising CJ, but then at the same time, it's like, okay, but now you're not necessarily giving a lot of love to your quarterback. But he talked about, his gut feeling and how that both players statistically were close, and he was hoping that would decide things. And he praised Kenny's decision-making. It's like he seemed like he was more willing to praise Kenny in the press conference today at times than he was CJ. Until that later question by Tim, which I just thought was kind of, it seemed like he's feeling like I have to keep the guy who didn't win the job encouraged, is how I took that. I didn't take that in any kind of nefarious way. I'm not saying like, oh, this is bad by Freeman. It just was interesting watching him kind of to juggle that, where you could tell he was trying to lift Kenny up, say, stay encouraged, we're going to need you, and that type of stuff, which I thought was really really interesting, that part of it. But when he later got asked by Tim Priester about CJ's the non-skill things, you started hearing him talk about, okay, he's talking about like his intelligence, as smart of a football player as I've been around, starts talking about his work ethic. And then you started to hear some of the things, he puts a lot into it. He says he's confident. He said he's overconfident at times, and he kind of laughed, which kind of leads to some of the things that we've talked about, as far as some of the mistakes that we're making, maybe making this a little bit of a closer competition than we thought it was going to be throughout the process. But I thought that's where, you talk about him, that's where it came from. And he talked about not asking him to go out there and win it all in week one. And he's a first-year quarterback. He's going to make mistakes, things like that. Make good decisions. Not every play needs to be a touchdown, be CJ Carr. And it's like, well, you're kind of saying a couple different things there, because part of who CJ Carr is I feel like every time he throws the ball, it's like he wants it to be a big play and he wants it to be a touchdown. So it's about finding that balance with the two. So, it was kind of mostly what you expected from him. He wasn't going to just talk about, oh, he's phenomenal, he's going to win the Heisman. I mean, he wasn't going to do that, nor should he do that. But also kind of saying, hey, look, first time starting quarterback, he's not going to look like Joe Burrow in game one. We're going to have to make sure everybody else around him is ready to do their job. And that was sort of my takeaways from his comments, Trev. What else? What did you hear from it? What did you take away from it?
Yeah, man. I mean, big picture, I think he was a young head coach who just went through his first legitimate quarterback battle. I think if you would listen to more of a veteran head coach, like your Kirby Smarts of the world who's been around it, or, I mean, go back and think of all of the quarterback battles that Nick Saban kind of had to oversee towards the end of his tenure. Once he got a little bit more comfortable, it's like, hey, so-and-so is going to be our starter. He gives us the best chance to win. We're rolling with him moving forward. Strong battle in the offseason by, insert quarterback name here. But ultimately, this was our decision at the end of the day. And so I think you're right. I think Freeman had an interesting task to kind of toe the line on either side. And I think for the most part, he did a pretty good job of it. But I do like that he added that nugget in there of, look, as a coaching staff, we have to be patient. Fans should be patient. The team has to be patient. We have to be patient, because he's not going to go out there and be perfect in his first ever start. Because we've said it before on this channel, Brian, the next meaningful pass CJ throws in a college football game will be his first meaningful pass he's thrown in a college football game. We had some questions around, okay, are you going to give 13 the leeway to go out there and make some mistakes, go out there and break some eggs? And I think that comment put my mind at ease a little bit, thinking about, okay, is it what he throws one incompletion and then he's looking over his shoulder a little bit? I think that put my mind at ease a little bit. But to your point, after Tim's question, he went on to praise his high football IQ, and then also acknowledge the fact that he is, able to make all the throws on the football field as well. That was good.
And his body language changed in response to that question compared to his intro. Because, like I said, I really feel like the intro, I think he was trying to do two things the way I think through it. Number one is I think he's trying to say, hey, look, I need to uplift the backup, because you're going to, like you said, you're going to need Kenny. And as we've gone through, you go back to the history of Notre Dame, going back to 2010, there's both seasons they've needed the backup quarterback to step up and not only maybe sometimes not start games, but come in some very important moments of games and sometimes big games. And so you are going to need Kenny Minchey in a 16-game season. You want to make sure he's still locked in. And then the other part of it is I do think there's a sense of let's tamp down a little bit some of the higher expectations of what he's going to be in game one. So that way people don't overreact. If CJ goes, 14 of 23 for 165 yards, a touchdown and a pick, and a 27-24 win, people aren't losing their minds and saying, let's bench the quarterback, which is probably going to happen anyway with some people. It's just the reality of fandom. But I think with the rational people, that's who Marcus Freeman's trying to talk to, is like, hey, let's tamp down expectations. Then you get to the question where he's in response to Tim's question, and you could just see his body language change, not dramatically, but like now it's in response. It's like, okay, this is the stuff where I'm like, okay, now let's talk about CJ. And I thought that was, and like you said, he can make every throw. That's the one thing that we did here. He is a smart player. He is working hard. It's just about, like you said, first thing he talked about, make good decisions. And that was the thing that CJ's got to do a better job of based on things we had feedback in fall camp, which, again, as we talked about, and I don't want to dive into it again, I'm not upset about that. Fall camp is the time to test those boundaries. It's the time to test those limits and find out what throws you can make and what throws you can't make. You don't want the first time you have to try to zip a ball in between three guys on 3rd and 9 with 2 minutes left in a game where if I don't make this throw, we're going to lose, to be in the 4th quarter of the Miami game. You want to say, okay, in practice, I got picked off twice doing this because I waited. but the 2 times I completed it, it's because I got the ball out early, got on the receiver pretty quick, but he was able to make the catch. Those are things that you want to learn now. And those are things that Marcus Freeman was talking about. So, and about to be honest with you, we're talking a lot about the quarterback. That wasn't even the biggest news coming out of today's press conference, Trevor. Marcus Freeman announced that Jordan Patelho will be ready to play against Miami. Now, he didn't get into the volume. He didn't get into the role. Nobody kind of had a follow-up, because part of the problem is you only get 2 questions. And so it's like there's a limited time. You can only ask 2 questions, and it doesn't allow the media to do a lot of follow-ups unless you want to give up. Well, I'll give up one of my questions to follow up what I was going to ask about, because people are writing stories from this stuff. But it was like, okay, how available is it? You know, is he on a pitch count? Is he just going to be available for nickel? Is he going to, or is he, dude, he's full go? When did he start practicing? We saw him. I mean, he was in pads day 1 of practice. There's just a lot of things he couldn't do upper body. Then we started seeing him do more of that stuff. I'm surprised, because the initial feedback we got was like late of end of the season. Now he's available week 1. They're going to have a very interesting decision to make as far as that rotation goes, because you've got 2 guys coming off of major injuries in Patelho and Boubacar. Patelho's coming off of 2 injuries, because he hurt the knee last year against Purdue and then hurt his upper body this summer working out. And so I'm very curious to see how they balance those reps between the 2 of them, so they're not overworking either guy or put a guy in a vulnerable position. But when you look at the depth chart, Trev, and we'll go over that here in a little bit, but you've got Boubacar, Bryce Young, Burnham Jr., Logan Thomas, and now Patelho. You don't have to overload one guy with 50 snaps in this game. And so I expect that we'll see just kind of a little bit of the wave approach at defensive end in this particular game, as they work Boubacar and now especially Jordan Patelho sort of into that, because there's just being 100% healthy and 100% like full go, and that's one thing. And then the other thing is, are you ready to go play a full game? Those 2 things aren't always the same, and sometimes you got to build a guy towards that. And so I'm very curious to see, where Patelho is. But even if it's just for 10 to 12 snaps a game, Trevor, that's a pretty darn good weapon to have. If he picks up where he left off last year, where he's playing the best ball of his career the first 3 games, if he can pick up where he left off then, boy, you're going to have something this year.
One of what we've seen in camp is any indication of his, I guess, athleticism and his twitchiness still being there. It's still there. He was one of the players early in camp, even though he wasn't going through some of the team drills because he was held out for what he was dealing with his upper body. His athleticism, his twitch, his jump off the line was still there. Hats off to him for taking the road to recovery seriously. Hats off to the training staff and the athletic training staff for getting him in a position where he is available for this game. But you look at this defensive end rotation, this defensive end depth chart, we're talking about a position group where 5-6 weeks ago, we're sitting here and, man, you're going up against, Francis Maui-Noah, and you're going up against Markel Bell, who's 6'9", and you got Boubacar coming off of a serious injury. Bryce Young's going into his sophomore year. We had some serious questions around this rotation. Now, as things started to pan themselves out, yes, early on. Now, as things have started to pan themselves out, this group is looking pretty dangerous ahead of the first game of the year. I'm pumped.
He also talked about the defensive tackle, and I thought that was a very telling comment also. He said, and you don't normally get this kind of you always get Marcus Freeman's a pretty open guy, honest guy, but you don't get this kind of specific comment where he said, look, he was like, that was my biggest question mark on the team going into fall camp or going into the season. I couldn't remember if he said fall camp or if he said kind of the off season. And then he's like, but I have as much conviction about that unit as any. And it kind of backs what we've been hearing all of camp and all of summer about what we've seen from Jason Onye and what we've seen from Jared Dawson and what we've seen from Gabriel Rubio and obviously Donovan Heinisch being named a captain. So I thought that was a pretty interesting comment as well, Trev, is he seemed to be pretty fired up about that. We'll see, how it plays out on Sunday night, but he doesn't throw a lot of praise like that out for position groups unless he's genuinely he's not doing that to make him feel better about himself. You know what I'm saying? He's saying that because there's a confidence there. And then obviously he gave Coach Washington a lot of credit for developing that unit, which he is, talked about Onye and Dawson and those kind of guys. The only thing that I was a little surprised by, Trev, and I'm looking at the depth chart again just to see if I missed it, but there was no Armo Mukum in the 3D at defensive tackle, which I found a little bit surprising. So we'll see how that kind of develops as well. And then the last thing, he did mention that there's an or at right guard with Gerby Lambert and Sylvan Apsher. He said they haven't. He said the comment that the way I took it is they haven't made a decision yet, because he said we're going to have to make a decision on that here soon. He mentioned that they could both play. He didn't say they would both play. I've said this a million times. I'm not against a rotation as long as you practice it for a little bit and then have a plan going in. Harry Hiestand laid out the perfect way to use a rotation in 2017. To every other series, like they're rotating, and in 4-minute, Tommy went in, and 2-minute, Robert went in, but other than that, it's every other. You don't do what they did against Louisville 2 years ago, where they just, like, the morning of the game, like, oh, by the way, we're going to rotate our guards in this game. Like, no, you don't do that. And then you're shocked that the offensive line didn't have a clue what was going on during the game. Like, you say, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to play both of you guys. It's going to be Gerby for 2, Sully for 1, or Sully for 2, Gerby for 1, or every other, whatever the case may be. Rep it, practice it, make sure the offense is flowing with both of them, and make sure everybody knows exactly what's going to happen. And not everybody knows before the series, but going into the game, everybody knows this is how it's going to play out. And if they want to do that, or they could just go with one guy. I mean, I'm just saying, like, if they wanted to go both, that's the scenario that we could see. And it wouldn't shock me either, Trevor. And this is no intel. This is literally just me sharing my opinion based on a comment that Mike Denbrock made. It also wouldn't shock me if we see scenarios in some short yardage where Sylvan Apsher's in the game instead of a second or third tight end in some obvious run situations. And he talked about, look, we may get a tackle out there or something like that. So that wouldn't shock me either. And I'm not predicting it, but I'm just saying that could maybe be how they use both of them in that situation. But I thought that part was interesting as well. Any other takeaways from the press conference, Trev, before we just kind of quickly go through the depth chart?
No, I mean, overall, it's a big picture. I think Marcus Freeman sounds extremely confident in where the team is as a whole heading into this week. They're not going to be perfect in game one, but I was paying attention to his demeanor the entire press conference, because it is a big matchup. I mean, it's a top 10 matchup to kick off their 2025 season. And it was very confident. It was very matter of fact. And that gives me, all the more confidence around, how I think the team is going to perform on Sunday. And so it was a good opening press conference. Heard some good things, some good takeaways. Definitely some content's going to be coming out about it too.
And definitely you could understand he knows that this is going to be a challenge.
Oh,
there was respect paid to Miami and Carson Beck, and we'll have a lot to say about those guys once we dive into the matchups and the games. But he understands, guys, this isn't a cakewalk. This is like A&M last year. This is like Ohio State in 2022, in that we're playing a really good opponent. We've got to bring as close to our game one A game as we have as a team. Yeah. And that's kind of, what he's saying, but without putting it into it, where I also didn't think he overhyped it, or he's making it like, look, guys, if we don't win this game, I mean, our playoff lives are, there wasn't that either. And that doesn't surprise me. That's not necessarily how he does things. I don't see him putting that kind of pressure on a team, and it'd be silly to do so, because it's like, guys, you lost to Northern Illinois at home in game 2 last year. You know what I mean? Like, you start 1-1, you're in a good place, but they obviously don't want to start 1-1, start 2-0. But that was kind of my takeaway was, look, this is a good opponent, and let's remember that as we're getting ready to go into this game. And I love the fact that he mentioned we've lost 6 straight games down there. Like, look, that's the challenge in front of us. Let's end that thing. And it's where I was watching the head coach at LSU's press conference yesterday, and lady brought up, that they're 0 for whatever in openers. And he's like, I don't think in those terms. I'm like, well, okay, you don't, but it's true. And you need to acknowledge it. Like, because it's like, look, this is the challenge in front of us. Not like, oh, woe is us. We haven't, but just like, look, this is what's in front of us, and this is what we got to go prove, and this is what we got to answer. And I thought he handled it tactfully as well. Trev, let's go through the depth chart real fast before we get out of here. I did post it on irishbreakdown.com. I'll have it up on the message board. I'll put it up on the free site here once we're done, because they released it later as we were getting ready for it. They did have Tyler Buckner, number 3 on the quarterback depth chart, which I thought was that was part of my projected depth chart. I was glad to see that. Tyler had a really good fall camp, like really good fall camp. Not that he was contending for the starting job. He wasn't, but he had a really good fall camp. Running back room, they had Jeremiah Love 1, Jadarian Price 2, and Aeneas Williams 3, which we expected. But they also had Nolan James number 4, which I was not surprised by. I was a little surprised by from the standpoint of that they didn't also include Jabron Payne. Not surprised from the standpoint of that, Nolan James has earned it. You and I have talked about this quite a bit. That kid's going to be very hard to keep off the field for Notre Dame this season. Very hard to keep off the field. Wide receiver is what we expected it to be. I was head scratcher that they put an or between Jaden Greathouse and Will Pauling, which I thought was odd. So that'll be interesting. We'll just monitor that. Could be nothing. I also don't put a ton on depth charts. We've talked about this before. Tight end, Ty Washington 2, or Jack Larson there. They did put an or. Gerby Lambert was 1. Sullivan Absher was 2. Whoever wins that job, it's going to be a massive player. Gerby Lambert's listed at 6'7", 335, and Sullivan Absher's listed at 6'8", 327. That's a big boy. Rest of the receiver room, Trev, was kind of what we expected it to be. Defensively, we already talked about the defensive end rotation, defensive tackle rotation. Linebacker was what we thought it was going to be. Mad Framo's listed as the number 2 at both Mike and Will. You were going to say something about the D-line, Trev?
I was. The one thing that's interesting is Cole Mullins has moved back along the interior.
Well, at least for the depth chart.
For this depth chart, yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious to see how that shakes out. Is he just a D tackle? Is he still going to do swing? I'm very curious to see how that's going to be, because he's another guy that we heard had a really good fall camp. They listed 3 guys at every defensive position, which I thought was interesting. And you're like, but I could see a lot of these guys playing, like the way that they're going to rotate bodies. They did list Don Schuler and Jalen Stroman as the starting safeties. That was on my projected depth chart. They have Luke Touch behind Don Schuler, Tay Johnson behind Jalen Stroman. That's not going to, there's going to be some interchangeableness with Jalen Stroman and Luke Talich and those guys. So we're going to see them kind of all. I think Don's going to be boundary. I think the other guys are going to kind of to move around. Corners are what we expected. We expected Leonard Moore and Christian Gray to start. We expected Mark Zachary and Dallas Gold to be their backups. The only thing that I thought was interesting, and I don't know, I'm curious if they've switched it late, like within the last week, or if it's just backwards on the depth chart, but they have Dallas Golden backing up Leonard Moore in the boundary and Mark Zachary backing up Christian Gray to the field. As of the Jersey scrimmage a week ago, Mark Zachary was before the Jersey scrimmage, you had Dallas Golden was playing to the field and Mark Zachary was playing to the boundary. But we saw Malachi Fields catch a ball on Dallas Golden, which could lead us to believe that maybe there was a switch within the last week or so where Dallas is now playing some boundary and Mark's playing some field. So that's possible, but I think they're both learning those 2 spots. And then nickel was what we expected it to be: Devontae Smith, Carson Hobbs, and Ben Minnick. So actually, some of the bigger surprises I thought, Trev, were on special teams. Marcello Diomede is the starting kickoff guy. And then you've got Noah Burnett's the starting place kicker. We didn't really know who the kickoff specialist was going to be. We thought maybe it could be Eric Schmidt. He's not there. Joseph Vinci's the starting long snapper. That's not a surprise. Buckner's the starting holder. Got Jordan Faison or Will Pauling as the punt returners. We weren't sure who this was going to be. And then, of course, Marty Biaggi said last week or 2 weeks ago that we were going to see Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, and they're listed as or back there on kick return. So that's the depth chart, Trev. Anything else kind of stand out to you from the depth chart? At least the first one. We won't be doing this every week, but this is just kind of the first one.
I know. I mean, when I look at this depth chart overall, it's a deep team. It's very, very deep on defense. And that is one thing that I've really noticed about this group. I mean, look, we're talking about a team that has all the length and athleticism in the world on defense. I think that's starting to reflect in some other things. I mean, right now, FanDuel has Miami's total points over under for the game at 23.5. And I would be shocked if many people took the over in that. I mean, this is a defense that's going to have the ability to come at you in waves truthfully. And so I think it's just always a little bit more comforting. I don't know about comforting, more confirming. We talked all offseason long about the depth of this unit and the length of this unit and the athleticism of this unit. And to see it on paper, to your point, having 3 defensive players listed at every single slot on the depth chart is really, really promising.
Yeah, it is. It is. So I think that'll kind of wrap up the recap. We won't be doing this on any other Tuesday. It's just, well, we'll do it next Tuesday because the press conference next week's going to be on Tuesday again. After that, it'll be back to the Monday show. We won't be having Monday shows, but we wanted to just kind of go over all this just because it is the first press conference of the season and it is opening week. So, yeah, so we'll kind of get out of here with this section before we move on to the next one with where we're going to talk about just the matchup. But it was just good to kind of be back out there where we're talking about a game again. We've had a lot of spring press conferences, a lot of fall camp and position. Like, we know who the starting quarterback's going to be. We know who the opponent's going to be. Patel is going to be back. We don't have a lot of questions right now other than, okay, who's going to be at right guard? I kind of think we know the answer to that. And then when's Jagasol going to be back? Like, that's really like the only question that we have right now left with the team based on the depth chart. I'm not even going to say it. I'm not even going to talk about it because I don't want to jinx it. But I already started. I have to say it now. It's about as healthy as I've seen a Notre Dame football team be at the end of fall camp. So hopefully that can continue. I just knocked on a little wood here. And yeah, so that's segment 1, Trev. We're going to get into what's next, or kind of what's at stake, and then a preview of Miami next. But before we do that, folks, do us a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you listen to. We would greatly, greatly appreciate that. It's a way you can help us without spending your money. It's just a way to help us by spending some of your time, which we hope that you're enjoy doing with us. And then, of course, as always, make sure that you check out the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. We've completely revamped sort of our coverage of the team and that what we're providing. There's things that we used to give out for free on the podcast, like the Upon Further Review, that will now be for message board only members only. You've got the video breakdowns, the all 22 X and O breakdowns, which are on there. We're going to be doing those after every game. Trev's got some content. I've got some content that's just going to be for members only. And look, if you're someone who really wants to dive into the game, learn the game, and not just be a surface level fan, that's the place to be, in my opinion. If I do say so myself, did a full explanation of what is inside zone, how does Notre Dame run it, how do they call it. Here's the statistics of every call that they made, every inside zone run that they had last year in the regular season. Did the same thing with duo and why those are kind of go together. Did a mid zone run. Here's a stat for you that you'll get to look at. Notre Dame ran mid zone last year by my count regular season 93 times. They averaged 9.1 yards per carry on mid zone last season. And so, but I break down why. I go into detail. I think it's about a 10, 15-minute video. They're each at least 8-9 minutes long. There's 4 different ones. That's the kind of stuff you're going to be getting on the message board, and you're going to get that stuff every week after every game. So you're not going to want to miss out on that stuff. And you can find that at boards.irishbreakdown.com.
All right, Brian, let's get into part 2 of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by FanDuel. And we are going to be taking a dive into the Notre Dame-Miami matchup. We're going to start this out by talking about what's at stake for Notre Dame. We're going to kick this off. We're going to talk a little particulars about the game just to make sure everybody knows where to tune in. I'm sure it's a nationally televised game on Sunday, day before Labor Day. Also the day before my 1-year wedding anniversary. Shout out to you, Lauren. But ideally, we're going into the 1-year anniversary happy feeling because I went into the wedding day last year with some happy feelings after they beat Texas A&M. But we are going to be breaking down some of the particulars of the game, but big picture, what is at stake here for Notre Dame? And then part 2, we're going to dive into more of Miami-specific preview. We talk about them on offense, talk about them on defense. But, Brian, it's game week, and we're here.
Dude, I'm so fired up about this. And then obviously the more specifics of the matchup we'll dive into like tomorrow and Thursday. So like the Notre Dame versus this. Today is going to be, let's talk about it from a Notre Dame angle. Let's talk about just Miami, preview just Miami. And then tomorrow, Thursday, we'll dive into the matchup stuff. But Dude, I've been waiting on this for so long, Trev. Just it's one thing to talk about Miami, it's part of a season preview, but it's another thing to say, hey, we're in game week. We're in game week, and it's time to rock and roll. And it's we're going to start finding out. We're going to start finding out what these games are like. And if you listen to Miami podcasts or look at Miami fans online, this is going to be a blowout. Notre Dame has no chance in this game. So when you talk about what's at stake, Trev, I think the first thing that we can kind of jokingly talk about is what's at stake is, Miami fans can understand how good Notre Dame is, but I mean, it is kind of interesting. But game is going to be, just a reminder for people, it's going to be Sunday night, which is trying to think. They've started on Sunday night before. They had the Texas was on a Sunday night back in 2016. They've had a couple games that started on Sunday. Wasn't there a game recently that also started on a Sunday? I know Navy was on a Saturday. I think there was another one. I could be wrong on that, but
Florida State in 21, I believe.
That might have been one too. Yeah, that might have been one too. But so game will be Sunday night. It'll be at 7:30. It's going to be in Hard Rock Stadium in Miami Gardens, Florida. And Notre Dame, Trev, as of right now, if you look at FanDuel, I believe as of this morning, it was still Notre Dame as a 2.5-point favorite. Is the over/under change on that, Trev?
The over/under is at 49.5.
Okay,
right
so
now.
it's where it was the other day, but it's down. It was originally came out as over 50. So a big matchup for Notre Dame. It's funny reading tweets this week. They're like, yeah, ESPN sending their number 2 team to do the game at Sean McDonough and Greg McElroy. I'm like, I'll take the number 2 because they're better than the number 1 crew. If we're being honest about that, but it's like, has Greg McElroy done like every game Notre Dame has played in the last 6 or 7 games? He did the Indiana game, did the Georgia game, did the Penn State game. I think he didn't do the title game, but this will be the 4th time in 5 games that Greg McElroy is going to be checking on Notre Dame, which makes a lot of sense as to why he says the things he says about Notre Dame and how good they are, because he's seen them. He's seen them live. He's like, guys, I did play-by-play or color for 3 of their playoff games. This is a good football team. So he'll be there. I think he does a really nice job. Very, very fair guy. But those are the particulars of the game, Trev. But as we dive into and we dive into kind of what's at stake, it's really kind of about looking at the series history and saying it's time to kind of get this back. It's time to get Notre Dame back to being on top of this series, because Notre Dame holds an 18-8-1 all-time advantage. Actually, it's 19-8-1, but one of the games is the 2012 game was vacated, which is still extremely lame. Notre Dame obviously haven't played Miami since 2017, a game that Miami won 41-8. Prior to that, Notre Dame had won 4 straight games. They beat Miami, and they had won 5 of 6. They beat Miami in 88, 90, 2010, 2012, and 2016. The only win in that period of time prior to 2017 was Miami in 1989, a stretch of games that we talked about yesterday with Chris Sorge, by the way, which was just awesome to do that. But it's really about reestablishing dominance in this rivalry. It's really that when you talk about what's at stake, and we'll get to more particulars, Trevor, but that's sort of a big picture thing as we briefly look at the series history, is I think it's what's at stake for Notre Dame. It's getting back to getting that taste of 8 years of having to be reminded of that game, and 41-8, 41-8, 41-8. And it'll be nice to hopefully see Notre Dame kind of say, okay, we don't have to talk about that anymore, because different coach, different result. And, we can finally put it behind us like we did the last 2 losses to Georgia.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, fact of the matter is Notre Dame is over in their last 6 games down in Miami Gardens. And when you start the conversation around what's at stake, it's that exactly. And I think Marcus Freeman has pulled the proper strings with his team before in the past, that, this roster, these coaches, they didn't coach in the 2017 game. They didn't play in the 2017 game. And they obviously weren't a part of the other 5 games that took place down in Miami prior. But Marcus Freeman and his staff and the team takes a lot of pride in just Notre Dame, not just their team specifically. And one of the blemishes for Notre Dame right now is they're 0-for-6 in their last 6 games down in Miami. That's at stake. You got to end that. It's one of those, it's kind of that next smaller domino. It's not as big of a domino as, beating the Ohio States of the world in the postseason, or, getting over the national championship hump or the Alabama and the SEC, but it is still one of those minor dominoes that Miami fans can kind of hang over the heads of Notre Dame fans. As much as I disagree with the premise of Notre Dame is going to lose because of what happened in 2017, it is still a valid point for them to bring up, being that the game actually did happen and it did end 41-8 in 2017. Unfortunately,
because Notre Dame fans would be doing the same thing if that happened the last time they played. Yeah. If Notre Dame would have gone down there in 2017 and beat Miami 41-8, let's be honest, Notre Dame fans would be like, this is going to be nothing. Remember what happened the last time we went down there? We handled business. This game's going to be a cakewalk. I get it.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And so that's a big piece of what's at stake for this team heading into this game. I mean, it's this season specifically. I think we can start getting into the conversation of it's the first step in following up a successful season with additional success. That is one of the things that we have yet to see from this Notre Dame program, really in my fandom, of you have a successful season, you go on a playoff run, or you make the play. Literally.
You were born in 1997, Trevor. They've never had two great years back to back. They've had a great year and then a good year, 06, 19, 21-ish. Yeah, but nothing where you're like, okay, yeah, this team is legit. It always seemed like last year's team was way better than this year's team. So literally of your life, we haven't really seen it since 92, 93, maybe. Since they've had really just 2 years in a row where that team could have won it all.
Yeah. I mean, the narrative has always been in my lifetime, but if it was last year's team, they didn't. And it's like, I don't want to have that conversation.
Or what if you took this guy off last year's team and put him on this year's team because clearly this year's team is missing that guy. Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
You're always left playing the what if game, but it is the first step of following up a successful season with success. That is what's at stake for this season specifically in this game.
Yeah. I mean, look, how you start a season does not define who you are as a football team. I mean, we've seen teams in the past lose games early on and still have great seasons. You think back to Ohio State, I think their second game of the year, maybe third, they lost at home to Virginia Tech, like convincingly by 14 points, went on to win a national championship. So it's not as though if you don't win the opener, you're doomed to just not be good. But it does put you in, as we saw last year, kind of behind the eight ball a little bit, where you now enter for the next 11 games. So for Notre Dame, that'll be 13 weeks because there's 2 byes between now and the end of the Miami game, the end of the season. You're now getting into a situation where it's like, dude, we can't afford to lose again. That's a lot of pressure against a schedule that you and I have believe is deeper than last year's schedule. There's more teams can kind of jump up and bite you, and you don't want to necessarily have that pressure. Let's be honest, Trev. There were some teams on the schedule last year that Notre Dame didn't need to play all that well to beat convincingly. And honestly, there was a lot of games they didn't play that well against Florida State. They didn't play great against Georgia Tech. They still smoked both of those teams because the talent level is just way better than what those teams were, especially with Haynes King being out. Not that I've always said that they would have beat them no matter what. But maybe that game looks a little different and a little bit more competitive he plays. There's not as many of those teams on this year's schedule as there was last year's schedule. And you don't want to necessarily have that added pressure of having that early loss. But it's also the flip side of it is the momentum that it can build with your team. And I'm very curious to see if Notre Dame can win this game. Do they react to this victory differently than they did the A&M victory last year? Because we've seen Notre Dame now twice play a big season opener like this. Marcus Freeman's second season opener was a cool environment, but it wasn't a big game. It was Navy and Ireland. Like it was 49-3, or I think is the final score, right? Like 45-3.
I think it was 42-3 was the final
42-3. It was convincing blowout. It was never competitive. It was over at halftime. First year at Marcus Freeman, they play on the road at Ohio State. And Notre Dame doesn't win the game. It was a very disappointing start to the season. They didn't handle it well. Next week, they come back home and lose to Marshall. Last year, completely opposite story to start the season. You go down, you play in the big game on the road, and you win this one. late in the game. Last time they had a lead late, lost it late in the third quarter to Ohio State, never got it back, lose the game. This time, this past year, they, back and forth game, Notre Dame puts A&M away in the fourth quarter. You didn't handle it well. You got a little too happy with yourself. Hey, we've arrived. Well, everybody in the world's telling us, well, Notre Dame's going to be a playoff team now. They ended up being right, but it was more so like they're not going to lose the rest of the year because this is the only game on the schedule that anybody's worried about, which I thought at the time was kind of nuts because, you still had Florida State. We didn't know they were going to suck after week one. Wasn't going to be as good as they were the year before after losing to Georgia Tech. But, USC was still a team people thought was going to be really good. And, but that was the storyline. That was the narrative is, well, they're a playoff team. And then, of course, that next week you lose to Northern Illinois. So the early season game has defined to some degree Notre Dame as a team. And this is an opportunity to go out there and make a statement and kind of show that, hey, we've learned from those ups and downs, and we're a team that's better prepared to thrive. And I think that's just first thing you look at is that. And then the second thing, Trev, is this will be a week one resume builder for the college football playoff.
Yeah, absolutely. This is one of, you could argue, one of two nationally recognized games on their schedule as of right now when it comes to the playoff implications conversation. Now, we are under the assumption that Notre Dame will play significantly more quality opponents on this schedule this year. You're replacing Army, which they were ranked, they were undefeated at the time, but when it comes down to the Jimmies and the Joes, Notre Dame had more of the horses in that game. Bryson Daly was fantastic, but unless Notre Dame really just overlooked them, didn't prepare the right way, they were going to win that football game. Mm-hmm. You're replacing a triple option team in Army with going on the road against an SEC team in Arkansas. You're replacing Georgia Tech, who didn't have their starting quarterback last year in that game in Atlanta, with Boise State, a team that made the playoffs last year and got a first-round bye. And even the teams last year on the schedule that were bad, maybe with the exception of Stanford, remains to be seen. But even with a team like Purdue, there's mathematically, I don't think that there's a way that they're as bad as they were last year. I don't.
You've replaced Florida State with NC State. That home ACC game. Mm-hmm. You've replaced Virginia with Syracuse, who's a much better football team. You just kind of go down the line and you say, okay, they've got a tougher sled this season. As you mentioned, you Army with Boise State. You replace Florida State with NC State. Just kind of thinking through like the rest of their schedule last year and who they played. You place for we said Virginia with Pitt, and it's just the schedule last year was tougher than people give it credit for. And then you can say, okay, well they don't have it. Do they have an ACC opponent as good as Louisville? Fair question. We'll kind of see how that one plays out. But Pitt and Syracuse both have a chance to be that kind of team. But you replace Miami of Ohio with an ACC team. Like if you want to look at it that way, or you replace them with Arkansas, however you want to say it, the top to bottom is tougher, and how you play in week one and then how you handle win or lose the results of week one are going to determine if this program's taking the next step. Because as you mentioned, Trev, we haven't seen Notre Dame in a long time, predating Marcus Freeman, have that back-to-back good season. Well, let's talk about what we don't know about Marcus Freeman yet. We don't know that he can have back-to-back elite seasons. He hasn't been presented with the opportunity. Well, now he is. Can he learn from his mistakes and his when I say his mistakes, I mean, as the head of the program, you're responsible ultimately for things that happen with your program. And so when you lose a game like Northern Illinois, you're obviously going to be the person who gets the blame, because that's the role of the head football coach. You're the one that, for whatever reason, didn't have the team prepared. And one thing you and I have said a lot about Marcus Freeman is he doesn't repeat the same mistake twice very often. So has they learned from it? What have they gathered from, past successes and failures of playing a tough opener? What have they gathered from kind of the bounce back? But at the end of the day, like, this kind of game is going to be very impactful. And I do think, like, I'm listening to this guy at CBS Sports, Chip Patterson, I think his name is, talking about the game, and you just hearing in his voice, I'm like, this dude still doesn't respect Notre Dame. This guy still just doesn't think much of Notre Dame. and picks Miami to win. I'm like, all right, whatever. And then I'm listening to Ari Wasserman and Andy Staples, and they did a fine preview, but like they're hyping up CJ Carr before the fall camp, and now they're like, well, I'm worried about CJ Carr because he didn't win the job convincingly. Like, so your takeaway is not that Kenny Minchey did really well, but it's that CJ Carr is not going to perform now. And you can just start to see as we get closer to the first game, some of that Notre Dame doubt starts to creep in. And honestly, Trev, I'm not even hating on that. I think it goes back to what you and I have talked about. You still have a lot to prove as a program, that you weren't just a 1 year and step back program, because that's what you've been for 25 years. You have that great year, 02, 2005, 2012, 2015, 2018, 2020. Lots of really good years, but then they're always followed up by disappointment. And this is a chance for you to kind of go out there, and what's at stake in this game? To silence those people that still have those doubts about Notre Dame as a program. I think it's a big part of it for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the, I guess you could call them naysayers, have a lot of validity to the concerns that they're bringing up. Because if I were to remove myself from the platform that I have now and from the chair that I have now, and a Notre Dame fan were to come to me and say, hey, I'm confident in this team for these reasons. Hey, I hear you. Point to me to a season where Marcus Freeman picked up a signature top 10 win in the month of August or September. Can't. Texas A&M last season, but early on, not top 10. Lost to Ohio State, number 5 ranked team in the country in 2022. Dropped the game to Ohio State in 2023. Hey, point to me a span of time since 2000 when Notre Dame has had repeated performances where they're legitimate playoff contenders, and you can't. And that is what is at stake this year for this team.
Right.
And so, to your point, that's why.
And just to be clear, we're not saying that Marcus Freeman has been this giant failure in August and September. The opportunities have been limited. Last year, Texas A&M was the only ranked team they played in August. Obviously, at the start of the season, then they played Louisville at the end of September. They were 15th. They were ranked 15th. And then you go back to 2023. None of the teams they played in August or September were ranked until they got to Ohio State on September 23rd and lost. And then you beat a ranked team on September 30th against Duke. It was at number 17 Duke. You go down to 2022. They lost to number 2 Ohio State and didn't play another ranked team in September. So your point was a top 10 caliber team. Well, they haven't. They've beaten some ranked teams, not a top 10 team. This is a preseason top 10 team. So it is perception-wise a different animal. We can maybe argue, are they better than this team or as good as that team? We'll find out. We really don't know. But the point is, it's not always just about the actual quality of the teams. That's part of it, but part of it is also the perception. And until Miami proves otherwise, people believe this Miami team to be a top 10 football team. And this is your chance as Notre Dame to go on the road at their place and win this type of game. Because if you look at Notre Dame's track record, they've had some big wins in recent years, Trev. They've had some, obviously the playoff last year was obviously a big win. Marcus Freeman's first year, they beat number 4 Clemson. That was at home. 2023, Notre Dame beats number 10 USC. That was at home. Last season, Notre Dame highest ranked team that they beat in the regular season was number 15 Louisville. As far as when they played, they didn't play any top 10 teams, so they got to the playoff. My point being, we haven't seen Notre Dame go on the road and beat a top opponent yet. They lost to USC in 2022. They lost to Ohio State in 2022. They lost to Louisville in 2023. They lost to Clemson on the road in 2023. And then in 2024, I don't think that A&M's a very good football team. They finished the year 8-5. That wasn't an elite team. So I think that's where this is why there's still that perception of Notre Dame needing to go prove themselves in a game like that. And I think that's fair. And that's the standard that Marcus Freeman holds himself to. You want to stop people doubting you, go win one of these games that so far you haven't had the opportunity to win, or you've been in the situations you haven't been able to win. So I do understand it, Trev. This isn't me criticizing Chip Patterson. I thought his analysis was kind of just superficial, whatever. But I mean, I get it though. If you take your Notre Dame hat off and you just say, hey, look, why are they doing this? Is it hate? Is it disrespect? And you say, maybe, but maybe it's also because this isn't a type of game that Notre Dame has had a lot of success in recent years. It's happened. I'm trying to think, when was the last time Notre Dame beat a team that was ranked in the top 10 on the road, meaning they were ranked in the top 10 at the time that they played? I'm trying to think about that, because they went 0 for 2 against top teams in 2021. In 2020, they didn't play any top 10 teams on the road. They beat number 1 Clemson. That was at home. 2019, they played number 3 Georgia on the road. Lost at number 19 Michigan. When was it, Trev?
I think it's Oklahoma in 2012. It was the last time they got a top 10 win on the road. If you go back through the seasons, think about, 15 Clemson, and Clemson wasn't even in the top 10 when they played them in Death Valley in 2015. They were like 12th.
It's still nuts. Yeah.
Weird, man. It was weird.
But I also look at it as like, you could even judge it like a team that ended up being pretty good. So like when they beat Michigan State in 2017 on the road, that wasn't perceived to be a huge win at the time because they were unranked, but Michigan State ended up 15th. That ended up being a great win, still not a top 10 team. And they weren't top 10 when they played either. So 2015, to your point, they had a chance. They did. Stanford was ranked in the top 10 going into that game. They were ranked 9th, and they lost. 2014, Notre Dame played at number 2 Florida State, lost. At number 9 Arizona State, lost. 2013, I don't think Notre Dame had a top 10 road game. Yeah, at number 8 Stanford, lost. So to your point, Trevor, you are correct. The last time Notre Dame went on the road and beat a team on the road that was ranked in the top 10 was October 27th of 2012. Now, interestingly, that team had 2 top 10 wins on the road that year, because they also beat Michigan State early in the year. Now, they ended up not being good, but Oklahoma was still pretty good at the end of the year. And so there are still plenty, and this is what we talked about yesterday with Chris Zorich, is there's still dragons that need to be slayed for Notre Dame. There's still those things, as for all the brilliant things that Marcus Freeman has done in a short period of time, there are still things that they have to, there's still mountains they have to conquer, right? Like they haven't done Everest yet. They've done some, they went out to the Rockies. They've done some really cool things. They did Pikes Peak, but they haven't climbed Everest yet. And there's a couple that you got to climb to get to Everest. You know what I'm saying? So that's what this game presents them with. Like, okay, haven't won a power, a New Year's Six bowl, right? One of the 6 major bowls. Haven't won one since January 1st, 1994, when you beat Texas A&M in Cotton Bowl. All right, check. For good measure, let's do it again in a week. Check. You know what I mean? Haven't beaten an SEC powerhouse in a year where they were actually good. Beat LSU twice, 9-4 LSU, 8-5 LSU. So what? But have you beat a really good SEC team? Notre Dame's chalked up a lot of wins over SEC teams in the last 10 years. Beat Vanderbilt. They weren't good. Beat a good South Carolina team, but that's like a top 20 South Carolina team, not an elite team. Yeah, your claim to fame was literally, but we gave Georgia a good game both times they beat us. That's what you were hanging your hat on. Not anymore. Now it's like 13-point win over the SEC champs. So you're doing it, but there's still some left to be done. Ohio State, box unchecked. Bama, box unchecked. National title, box unchecked. Road game over top 10 opponent, box unchecked. And that's what this game, and it's exciting to think about because that's what this presents itself with. Haven't won a game at Miami since 1977. Haven't won a top 10 road game since 2012. Now, you had 2 top 10 wins away from home last year. And you can kind of say you played it where they play the SEC title game for a long time. It's kind of Georgia's territory. Fair. It's still not Athens. You know what I mean? So it's just a different animal. And that's the exciting thing about when you talk about what's at stake. That's what Notre Dame has a chance to prove. And we don't need to dive into it. Brian Smith and I talked about the recruiting impact. There's that as well. But let's try to get into some of the more specifics of what's at stake for this game. And not so much what's at stake, as it's partly what's at stake, but then also things that we're going to finally get a chance to learn about from this football team. And as we mentioned earlier, it really starts with, the next pass we see CJ Carr throw is in a Notre Dame uniform in a game will be the first pass we see CJ Carr throw in a Notre Dame uniform in a real game. So we get a chance to finally see that.
We do, and we've spent a lot of time this offseason talking about how we're going to reach a point in the offseason where we're just going to have to buckle up and start to learn about these things together as the regular season starts to progress. And I think that moment is right now. We're about 5 days before kickoff, and there's a lot of speculating. We did a lot of speculating and projecting as this offseason has gone on. I think now we can comfortably say we're at the point where now we're just going to have to buckle up and wait and see. This is going to be our first opportunity to see CJ Carr as a starting quarterback at Notre Dame. We're going to see what a year or two Mike Denbrock offense is going to look like. We're going to see what type of player CJ is. He has all the ingredients. It's kind of like if you ever watch those videos of, like people making recipes and stuff. It's like, that looks like it would be good. That, I like this and I like that and I like that ingredient and I like that ingredient. But
I love those shows on YouTube. I have a whole saved thing on YouTube of cooking, of different cooking recipes. Like, I'm gonna have to replace this with that, because I don't like that. But love those things.
Me too,
and all
man.
The ingredients, and you go shopping for them at the store, and that kind of like what you're saying. That's what Marcus Freeman's been doing the last couple of years, right? Is going down, shopping down the right aisle. He's going down the luxury aisle now, not the bargain aisle, allegedly, which I still never agreed with that, because it's like you had plenty of big time players, you didn't know how to use them. But now he's putting all those ingredients together. I love that. And now you got me all excited, Trev. Now I'm going to start watching my cooking channels again.
Yeah, man.
And start making some dinner. But continue with your point, because it's a great point. I just couldn't help myself. I was like, dude, I love those channels on YouTube.
Oh, it's
love them. My wife said, you should try Pinterest. I was like, hold on a second. We're crossing some lines now. Okay? I don't mind doing some YouTube. You ain't going to find me on Pinterest, okay? And I know we kind of cross. We step with some, it's a habitual line stepper happening over there with my wife. But we're not doing that. But that's what Marcus Freeman's been doing the last couple of years, though, Trevor, is putting all those ingredients together so that this team can be poised to go handle some business. And obviously, CJ Carr's been a big part of that because he's been committed. It's like he's a sophomore, but he's been part of the program now for like 4 years.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. When you think about it, he's been committed to Notre Dame since 2022, I believe. Correct?
Yep.
Wasn't it June before Marcus Freeman's first year? Let me go look at that real quick, but I believe that I'm correct on that.
Yeah, I think it was middle of the year in 22. Yeah. I think it was middle of the year in 2022. But look, I think that's the reason why a lot of us are so excited. I am now coming up on about a year of being affiliated with Irish Breakdown from this seat, but I've been an avid listener since 2020. Tuned into the first show, post game of the Alabama game in 2020. Oh. Wasn't a fun show, but I was there for it.
Yeah, well, it was fun for me. I got a lot off my chest. I did some serious ranting during that one, buddy.
You did. It was awesome.
I was explaining that to Chris Zorich yesterday, and he's like, dude, we did the same thing. It was like him and Tim Brown, and he's like, we did the same thing. We were so mad. That was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I've been in this chair now for about a year, but I've been listening to Irish Breakdown now for years. And it seems like almost since the time that I started listening to this show, CJ Carr's name has been brought up and brought up and brought up for good reason. And it's, hey, when he gets his opportunity for this, and it's, hey, when it's finally his time to shine, we're going to see this offense blow up. Ladies and gentlemen, we are 5 days away from watching that come to fruition or taking the first steps for that. To Brian's point earlier in the show, he's not going to go out on Sunday and look like 2019 Joe Burrow, like he did in the season opener against Texas in 2019. Wouldn't be upset if that happened, but it's not my expectation. And so all of that, it's all the waiting, it's all of the, I guess, anxiety that comes with waiting for the season to come. It's all about to come to fruition, and it's going to be our first look at taking a look at what 13 is going to do under center, man. And I'm excited for it. Really, really excited for it.
I'm also excited to see what a Chris Ash defense is going to look like. That's another thing that we're going to find out is, can Chris Ash continue what Marcus Freeman and Al Golden started, and what we expect the Marcus Freeman team to be known as, which is, can you play elite defense? You've got, talk about having all the ingredients. It's like other people Al Golden went and shopped down this aisle, and Al Washington say, you go over there to this, get me some, the best piece of beef you can find. Money's no obstacle. Hey, Mike Mickens, you go over here and get me this really brilliant thing over here. And and hey, Max Bulla, we're going to go over here and get this wonderful thing, and we're going to put them all in. We're going to buy them, we're going to get them, we're going to put them on the counter and say, all right, Chris Ash, do something with it. And he's got to be thinking like, dude, this is pretty sweet. Like it's pretty awesome. But he's going to have to cook it. So like, my wife had surgery, and our church family has been phenomenal. They've brought meals over to our home, and we get to eat them, which is a huge thing. But like they were already cooked. They were already cooked and brought over, and then now we just got to eat it. That's not what happened to Chris Ash. It'd be like somebody from the church coming over saying, here's a bag of groceries. Go cook the food. Like that's what Chris Ash has to do now. And we're going to find out, is he a good cook or not, as we continue our cooking analogies here at Irish Break.
I love it, man. I'm starting to get hungry. I'm starting to get a little hungry.
I want to go cook something, man.
I was about to say, part 3 of today's show will be in the kitchen, and we'll be breaking down what we're having.
Here's what we'll be making this weekend for the game. Yes.
This is my Jeremiah love of spices. But look, man, all offseason long, Chris Ash has been talking about, this isn't my defense. This is the Notre Dame defense. And I've had a lot of time to mull over that comment, because he's been very consistent with that being his approach to all the questions that he gets bombarded with of what is this going to look like and what is this going to look like. And you think of top-level programs. I think of, the Alabamas of the world, the Clemsons, the Georgias. They've gone through coordinator changes. But their program was always known for having this. Their program was known for being a lead on defense. You have to be able to win against Alabama's defense to beat them really throughout the duration of Nick Saban's tenure. But he didn't have the same defensive coordinator from 2009 to 2023. And so this is going to be our first opportunity to get to look at Chris Ash and say, okay, are you maintaining Notre Dame's program identity of having an elite level defense? Or are we going to get to the end of the season and say, yeah, that was Chris Ash defense? And I'm excited to be along the ride with everybody else to see what that's going to look like.
Are we going to say, that was Chris Ash defense, or that was a Chris Ash defense? I mean, that's what it boils down to. And look, we've a lot's been made of the Notre Dame receiving core, and barring it just being a downpour the whole game, we're going to see a chance for them to finally step up and perform. What's Malachi Fields going to bring to the table? What's a year 2 breakout? Are we going to see year 3 breakout from Jaden Greathouse? What's Will Paulding going to provide the offense? Those are all questions. Can Jordan Faison stay healthy? I mean, we had high hopes for Jordan Faison last year too, and I think first catch of the season, second catch of the season, he gets rolled up on. He misses games. He's never the same guy really till the playoffs. And so we're going to find out, like, what's that receiving core going to look like? And then I think another piece of this too, Trevor, is, we hear a lot about Miami's lines. Offensive line is going to be really good. Defensive line is going to be really good. And I don't dispute those things. And we'll bring up some numbers here as we preview Miami and the third part of the show today. Say, like, well, yeah, there's a reason why those lines. They're not considered good because of history. Well, because Russell Maryland and Cortez Kennedy and Jerome Brown played there, they're going to be good again. Like, and there are teams that kind of still get that, right? Like, wait, hold on a second. Like, LSU hasn't had a good secondary in like a decade. All right. So, I mean, why are we still talking about them being DBU? This is a different animal, and that's a bit hyperbolic. They've had some in the last decade, but I'm trying to make a point. It's been a while since like Tyrann Mathieu and those type of guys were having part of an elite secondary. They're considered that because people watched what this team did last year. And so that means we're going to have to find out right away in week 1 and week 3. So game 1, game 2, if Notre Dame's lines are as good as we hope that they are, and how as good as they need to be. Talk about what's at stake. Your line reputation is at stake here, good or bad. If you perform well, hey, Notre Dame's lines are as good as advertised, baby. They're legit. Or do you see what Miami did to Notre Dame's lines? Like, that's what's at stake as well for Notre Dame. And Marcus Freeman said at the beginning of his press conference, look, they're a lot like what we are. They build around their lines. Well, 2 teams who believe strongly in building in the trenches, squaring off Sunday night, who's done it better? That's going to be the question. Is it Joe Rudolph and Al Washington's guys, or is it going to be, Alex Mirabel and I know Jason Taylor coaches their DNs. Do they have they have a defensive tackles coach as well? But that's going to be the question: is who's done it better? Who's built their program through the trenches better? Thing is, they're both in year 4. They both arrived at their respective schools the same year. And so we're going to find out whose foundation in the trenches is better. I think that's something else that's at stake this weekend as well, Trev.
Yeah, I mean, their identity as a program is to be able to stop the run and run the ball. And you are going into week one into a hostile environment against a top 10 opponent that is also pretty beefy along the offensive and defensive lines. Will that program identity prevail? Will that hold true? Will you be able to stop the run and run the football? Offensively, you better be able to run the football, like Marcus Freeman alluded to in his press conference, because you have a redshirt freshman starting at quarterback on the road against a top 10 opponent. And then defensively, postseason, it was a tough sample size. Run defense was spectacular against Indiana and Georgia, and it was not spectacular against Penn State and Ohio State. So what version of this defensive line are we going to be? They're back to being healthy. They're deeper. They can come at you in waves. But a lot of that was just off-season speculation. We only have 5 more days to wait to see, okay, will they actually come at you in waves? Will it actually be, oh, man, they're throwing out, Onye and Traore and Burnham and Tuialamaka and Dawson, and will it look like that? Or is it going to look a little bit like what it did at the end of last postseason? Remains to be seen.
Or like it did in 2017.
Exactly. It's going to be huge. Absolutely going to be huge.
Because like Notre Dame in 2017 success was built around, boy, they have great lines, especially their offensive line. And they go into that Miami game in 2017, and we're going down there thinking, I know it's going to be hostile and Miami's undefeated and all this, but man, have you seen this Notre Dame offensive line? They've run for 300 straight yards. They've run for 300 yards in was it how many straight games? It was, let's see, going into Miami, they had run for at least 300 yards in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 straight games, and had gone for at least 300 yards in 7 of their 9 games they'd played that year, including a game of over 400 and a game of over 500. And then they go play Miami and they run for $109. I mean, 2 best defensive lines you played that year, Georgia, Miami, you went for $109 and 55 yards. There's a lot of different reasons for that. They couldn't throw the football there, but that's part of that thing that you still have to prove, Trev. And you went down there and played that Miami team that had a lot of talent on that defensive side of the ball. They had Chad Thomas, they had RJ McIntosh, they had Joe Jackson, Trent Harris, Demetrius Jackson, Kendrick Norton. You had a pretty good defensive line, talented defensive line with NFL players, and they whooped you. What's different now? Or is it just same old, same old? And that's a part of what's at stake. And then there's the final things we've talked about all summer, Trev. Is this team hungry? Is this team focused? Are they locked in? What's the leadership truly like? Those are all things that are part of it as well. When you talk about what's at stake, it's your identity as a football team starts to get built now. And that's the final piece. And you're not defined by who you are in game one, but it certainly sets the tone for who you're going to be as a football team, win or lose. And sometimes losing can be something where your tone is set. And yeah, the outcome was a good, and we've got to improve here and clean this up there. But like in 2017, when Notre Dame lost to Georgia, and Drew Tranquil was like, how are you feeling right now? He's like, I feel bad for all of our future opponents. And then that's exactly what happened. They went out the next week and ran for 515 yards on Boston College and just kind of steamrolled everybody until Miami that year. So like those are all parts of it. Your culture, your identity begins to be established in the opener. And that's true for both of these football teams, but especially Notre Dame, because I do think the stakes are still higher. Because now Miami's trying to get to a point. Notre Dame has gotten there a much higher point, and it's going to be harder for Notre Dame, I think, just based on the past, to kind of get over that hump than it will be for Miami to show improvement on last year. Miami could go 10-2 again, make it to the college and make it to a bowl game and win, and you're like, that's improvement. If Notre Dame goes to 10-2, misses the playoff, wins a bowl game, it's like, it's a disappointment. It just because of where they are doesn't mean that they're better or worse. It just means that the standard's been set even higher, and that's what Notre Dame's going to be. That's the standard they're going to be held to. That's part of the thing that comes with success is, well, now everybody wants you to continue to do that. That's just the reality.
How exciting is it that we're in a position where we're talking about Notre Dame being the gatekeeper in back-to-back games of preventing teams from making it to that next step? It's a good place to be in. I mean, if Miami beats Notre Dame, that's something that they can look back onto. Not even just this year. It's kind of like how we looked at the Georgia game. Hey, Notre Dame's here now. They beat Georgia. They beat the SEC champs. Notre Dame now gets to play a little bit of a different role. Instead of them like scratching and clawing to be in that national recognition, inching one step closer to being a tier 1 program, now they kind of get to be the people of, hey, if you want to get there, you now have to go through us. They have that opportunity this year against Miami and against Texas A&M, more specifically Miami. Now, I know we're getting ready to dive into them as a program, but they've been a program that, the U has allegedly been back 5 times in the last 20 years. And
like so, Notre Dame has.
Like Notre Dame has.
Like, let's be real. Like, 2012, Charlie Weiss, they're back. No, they're not really back. 2012, Brian Kelly, they're back. No, they're not back. No, 18. This time they definitely are back. No, they're not. Right.
So which narrative holds true? And I think that ultimately that's what's at stake for this game. Beyond just top 10 matchup, playoff implications this year, big picture, there's a lot at stake with this one, Brian. A lot at stake. Well, listen, folks, that's going to do it for part 2 of today's show. Don't go anywhere. We're getting ready to take a deeper look at Miami as a team. And we're going to break down head coach, offense, defense, big picture look. We have more matchup stuff coming later on this week. All the more reason to be subscribed to this channel. Make sure you have that notification bell starred so you know and you get notified whenever we go live here. Be sure to hit that like button. We have 485 awesome listeners live in the chat right now. Be sure to hit that like button at some point during the show. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, in part 3 of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by FanDuel, we're going to take a big picture look at Miami. And we're going to talk about that. They're Notre Dame's first opponent on 2025's schedule. They will be playing down in Miami, Florida, in Hard Rock Stadium. When we start to look at Miami, I think it's important to begin how they enter this game. Let's take a look back at the 2024 season. A lot of good, did not end the way that they wanted it to. Can Mario Cristobal and the rest of this program use that to fuel them and continue to ascend in 2025? Or is how they ended the season just a kind of a preview of things to come this year for them, Brian? I think that's a really important question.
It's interesting how the way a season ends can so much determine how your team is perceived in the offseason. And the way that Miami's season ended with losing 3 of their final 4 games, I believe, has kind of left this a little bit of just a disappointing taste in your mouth about the season. But it was still a very good step in the right direction season for Miami. You're talking about a team in, Mario Cristobal's first 2 years. They went 5-7 in year 1. They went 7-6 in year 2. Had some not so good moments and had some good moments. I mean, you look at their 2022 season, first year there. They lose to Texas A&M. They get beat by Middle Tennessee State by 2 touchdowns. They lost at home to Duke. Riley Leonard torched them that year. They lost at home to Florida State, 45-3. Clemson beat them 40-10. Pitt beat them 42-16. That was 2022, Marcus Freeman's first year. Just getting obliterated, Miami did. And they walked into a situation where Mario Diaz did not do a great job of Miami, but they weren't as bad as 5-7. He went 6-7, 8-3, 7-5. But it was all part of dude, you have to rebuild the culture. It was not good. The roster was not as good as it should have been. You go out in year 2 in 2023. You show some improvement. You go 7-6, 2-game improvement. You beat Texas A&M at home. You beat Clemson that year at home. Clemson ended up not being that good. You still lost games, to good teams. You lost to Georgia Tech at home by 3, and I still don't have a clue how they lost that game. Like what they were thinking at the end of that game. Got the next week, played North Carolina on the road. Really good North Carolina team with Drake May, and you lose by 10. You lose by NC State by 2 touchdowns. You lose again to Florida State, but this time instead of it being 45-3. You lose 27-20 at Doak. You lose to a really good Louisville team, 38-31, really close game. That was a Louisville team that went and played for the ACC championship that year. That was a good football team that, look, if you go look at it, Miami was a lot more competitive against Louisville in 2023 than Notre Dame was. If you go look at forget the score. I mean, the score was obviously not that much different. It's a 6-point difference. Miami lost by 7, Notre Dame lost by 13. But Notre Dame scored late to make it a 13-point game. Much more competitive game. And then Miami comes out in 2024 And you've got Cam Ward at quarterback. How is he going to be? There was this weird offseason where he was going to go pro unless somebody gave him enough money to make it. I had questions about how bought in this kid was going to be. I'll be honest about that. And I don't know whether he was or wasn't at that time, but he sure played like a guy that was bought in all year. And really from game one, you're like, this is a different Miami team. And you talk about the Florida game and just coming out and just annihilating Florida, blow out Florida A&M, blow out Ball State, blow out South Florida. And then the Virginia Tech game happens and you're thinking same old Miami. But they made plays to come back and win the game, Trev. Like that's the point. Is we can talk about questionable calls and all that, but past Miami teams would have folded and they wouldn't even been in that situation. Then they go out the next week. They go out to California. And you're like, here we go again, another Miami game. You're just letting Cal is destroying you. Cam Ward's playing terrible. They're letting Jaden Ott, who was injured, catch screen passes for big plays. And you're like, well, there goes Miami season. And then they roar all the way back and win 39-38. And you could say like, well, yeah, they shouldn't have let the game get that close to Cal. Guys, they've been doing this for years, games like this against Cal. But in the past, it's over. You get blown out. It would have looked like Duke in 2022. You just would have kind of rolled over and died and let the butt whooping happen. They didn't. They battled back and they won the game. Next week, this was to me the game that more than any showed the kind of football team they are by going on the road and beating a really good Louisville team last year. And so, yes, the Georgia Tech loss was disappointing. The Syracuse loss was just inexcusable to blow a 3-touchdown lead when you've got the ACC title in front of you. But still, guys, take a step back. 10-2 season, there's this trend line, right? I mean, I feel like Mario Cristobal is in year 3 where Marcus Freeman was in year 2. You're showing progress. You're doing some good things, but you got to avoid this bad loss and that bad loss and take that next step. Can they do that in 2025? Now that's the question that we're going to find out to get answered this season. But you can't deny whatever you feel about Mario Cristobal, whatever you feel about Miami. If you're looking at this from an honest analysis standpoint, this is a program since he's been there that has been on a steady ascent. 5 wins, 7 wins, 10 wins, good wins. The embarrassing ways they found ways to lose before didn't happen as much last year. And the 2 teams that beat them, Trev, you and I talked about this. We watched Georgia Tech physically go toe-to-toe with Notre Dame for 4 quarters. They didn't have the athletes to play with Notre Dame. And then we would watch that team take Georgia to 9 overtimes. There's no shame in losing to Georgia Tech at Georgia Tech by 5. None. That's a good football team. The Syracuse game in itself is not a bad loss. That's a 10-win football team. It's the way they lost that bothers me. And I think that's a bit of the concern. And I don't even count the bowl game. If Cam Ward plays the second half of that game, they don't lose. So I don't really care about that. The 10-2 is what matters to me. Now the question is that who they are? Do they take a step back because of how much personnel they lost? Or are they on the steady climb in year 4? That's what we're going to find out with Mario Cristobal's team. Has he built the culture? And has he recruited the right kind of players to, at the very least, maintain? I think if Miami maintains where they were last year, that's a win. That's a good sign based on how much they lost from last year's team. And I think that then helps them kind of get to that next step because now they become an even more attractive school than they already are from a recruiting standpoint. So I think that's what's at stake for Miami this year, Trev. Not just this game, but just looking at Miami as a whole, is can you build on that success, improve in some areas, do this, do that, and go out there and say, hey, we're going to be a better football team than we were last year. Or at least we're going to, have a comparable record than we were last year. And I think, we're going to find out if they can do that, but that's what's at stake. And they've got a lot of opportunities this year with statement games. Getting Notre Dame at home is a statement game. This Florida team is going to have a much more better perception if you beat them than last year's Florida team, who everybody was like, when they beat them 41-17, it's like, well, yeah, we knew Billy Napier was going to get fired anyway. Florida's going to suck. It's over. You beat this Florida team, it's going to have a completely different feel to it. Completely different feel to it. You get a chance to play at SMU. You get a rematch against Louisville. You get at Florida State. You got to go. Can you go on the road in November and back-to-back cold games and win? So there's a lot of opportunities for Miami to show we're not We're not the Miami you've seen the last decade, the last 15, 20 years. We're different Miami. We're getting back to being the U. They're not there yet, but we're getting back to being that. Or is it just kind of like, yeah, they're going to be good, but that's it? I think that's what's at stake.
I agree completely. And there's a lot of different outlets that kind of view them as taking another step in the right direction, or at least preseason wise, there's a lot of hope that Miami at the bare minimum repeats what they did last year. You know, you go and you talk about the major outlets. And this year, what we did before the show is we looked at Athlon Sports, Lindy Sports, Phil Steele, and then obviously the AP and coaches poll. And in every single one of them, except for one, which was Phil Steele's, Miami was ranked as the 10th team in the preseason this year. Phil Steele had them ranked as the 14th team in the country. So what does that show us?
That's the range. Do you believe that, Trev? That's the range to me that says if they're anywhere from 10 to 16, 17 at the end of the year, that's the range where I'm like, okay, I think Miami's here. This is the floor now. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's in a chance to establish a new floor for Miami. I think that's what that ranking would do for them. If their end of the year ranking is in the range of where their preseason ranking is now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to give them the foundation to build on and move forward, because what's been Miami's handicap in the past? It's what Notre Dame's handicap was in the past. Before we've kind of seen this Freeman era, it's like, okay, we watched them be a top 10 team for the majority of 2024. It's what Miami was. Are they going to be around the top 10 conversation or in the top 10 conversation throughout 2025? Or are they going to be fighting for their lives to be 22, 23, 24, 25?
And lose
I think
all
that's
of the momentum you got last year.
Exactly. Because you don't
go ahead.
You don't want to give fans the opportunity to say, okay, well, you went 10-2 because you had the number 1 overall draft pick last year and people weren't expecting much from you because you went 7-6 the year before.
This veteran team with all these veteran receivers, and you had Xavier Strepo and Royho, and you had all these guys that are not there anymore. Say, well, that's why you won. It is a one-year wonder, which is what we've talked about with Notre Dame over the years. That's what Marcus Freeman's got to prove. Is like 2012 was great. It was awesome. You lost Manti, you lost Cap, you lost, Tyler Eifert, you lost this, you lost Zach, you actually had Zach Martin back. You lost Ever Golson you lose this guy, you lose that guy, and then all of a sudden you're 9-4, you're losing to Pitt in South Florida. Actually, they lost to South Florida the year before. That's how sad it was. Which year did they lose to Tulsa or South Florida? But that's what it was. Okay, you had that one great team, but then when all those guys graduated, you're back to what you were before. And that's what I'm saying is, like, when you look at Marcus Freeman, it's 9 wins, 10 wins, 14 wins. It's an ascent. No, they're not back to where we expect them, where the standard is, but they're ascending. Miami, 5, 7, 10. Are they back to where the U is back? No, the U's not back yet as of today. But that's what makes this Notre Dame game so big, because this is a step towards that. Right? That's what Clemson did, right? What was the moment? Dabo Swinney has said this time and again. What was the moment where he said our program was changed that day? It was the day they beat Notre Dame. And everybody finally bought in and was like, wow, this isn't the Clemsoning anymore. This team is legit. They went that year, played for the title, lost, came back the next year, got the rematch against Bama, got it over the hump. That's what Notre Dame's trying to do. That's what Miami's trying to do. And I think this game is an example for both of these teams to do that. And when you look at Miami, they've got their own doubters. I mean, Notre Dame's not the only – it's not like everybody's like, oh, Miami's going to roll. The U is back. No, they're not saying that. They're saying, hey, this is a talented team. But there's still questions about, can Mario Cristobal consistently get his team ready for these moments? We talked about it yesterday, Trev. Somebody asked about, big game Mario, and I'm like, well, it depends. He's got some huge wins. He went on the road and beat Ohio State in Columbus in 2021, CJ Stroud. And then goes and gets blown out twice by Utah the next year with the APEC. Like, it's that opportunity for both programs to say, no, we are back. Or at least we're still on the trajectory to be back. And I think Miami more so than Notre Dame. Like, I don't think Notre Dame gets any moral victories out of this game because of what they had last year. I think if Miami goes toe-to-toe with Notre Dame, and even if Notre Dame wins at the end of the game, I think you can look at this Miami team and say, we just went toe-to-toe with the defending national runners-up who brought back a lot of starters, and we're basically rebuilding our roster in a lot of situations. We're going to be all right. I think it'll be valid to say that. I think Miami has more of room for taking something good out of this game, even in a loss, where Notre Dame doesn't have that. That was last year. Like, I mean, that was maybe A&M. That's gone now because of what you did last year. And I think that's what's at stake for Miami as you look at this. And I think the schedule, too, sets up, Trev, in a way, as we kind of continue our preview, where there's more than one opportunity for Miami to make a statement this year. Would you agree with that? I don't think the Notre Dame game is their only chance to go out there and say, hey, we're on our way back. I think the Florida game is that. I think Florida State could potentially be that, depending on how good they are. I think Louisville can be that. I think at SMU can be that. And then how they finish the year in the cold weather is going to tell us a little bit about the mental toughness of this Miami football team that wants to get back to being a championship caliber football team. Because look, there's some opportunities where you may have to play a playoff game in a cold environment if you're not hosting. So I think there's more than just one opportunity for Miami to go out. But I also think while this is a challenging schedule, it's not a gauntlet either, which means accepting less than 10-2 is not going to be as easy to digest. Because I don't know how many fans are going to be like, man, but that's a really good SMU team. You know what I mean? Like, they still don't have that respect, even though that is a really good team.
I mean, their schedule sets up favorably, and I mean that in multiple different ways. First and foremost, it's favorable because they don't leave the state of Florida until November 1st. That is pretty ideal if you're a Southern team. That is for sure. Now, with that being said, it's also favorable in the stance that you have multiple opportunities to get some marquee wins under your belt if you're Miami. You host Notre Dame, you host Florida, you're on the road against a Florida State team that will, by all accounts, be improved. What does improved look like? By October 4th, are they going to be 5-0? I doubt it. But could they be 4-1? Could they be a really competitive 3-2? Who knows? All I know is they're not going to look like what they did last year. You get to host Louisville, who's another team in contention with being in the ACC Conference Championship discussion. You're on the road against SMU, but it's going to come down to how do you finish your season? Does the season finish similar to how it did for you last year, where you're just dropping games at the end of the year where you shouldn't be? Because I could see that. NC State's a trap game for Notre Dame. I could very well see it being a trap game for Miami as well. Hosting NC State at the end of the year after CJ Bailey has 10 career starts under his belt at this point in time.
Right in between Syracuse, which you want payback against, and the road game at Virginia Tech, which is an old Big East rival. Yeah, it's a trap game for both teams. Great point.
Absolutely. And then you're going to have to really pay attention to how do you handle the cold weather games. You get back-to-back road games in cold weather environments on the 22nd and 29th of November. Oh, and by the way, they don't have a single bye week in the month of November either to kind of gather themselves, get their wits about them, and find their footing. So they're going to have to hit the month of November. They're going to have to be a hot team, that's for sure.
Trev, let's look at as you kind of talk about this schedule. I do think, as we mentioned, this is a big year for Mario Cristobal. I think if he's going to kind of get himself in that the U is back territory, and like again, he played in the 90s. I believe his early in his career, I believe, was the end of the Miami dynasty of the 90s, was the beginning of his career at Miami. I think he was, somebody in the chat yesterday said, I think his freshman year was 1990, which meant he was kind of part of that. If you want to restore it, like year 4 is when you got to start saying, okay, like we're different now. And that's why I say that the floor has got to be raised, in my opinion, and to where 10-2 is now, that's your floor. Like, that's the key.
You get into the area, and by the way, my apologies. My landscaping guy is outside of our apartment right now, just going to work with a leaf blower.
Yeah, it's when you come back off of muted, it's really loud. That's what startled me a couple times, and I don't know why it does that, but that's why I was like, "What the heck?" Because you're very loud at first when you first come back in my headphones. It could just be my headphones. But anyway, please continue. I did hear the mowing.
You gotta love technology. Yeah, like I said, apologies for the landscaping guy outside. Hopefully it's done soon. But Miami needs to get back into the position where 10-2 starts to become the expectation and not the anomaly. You know, I look at where Notre Dame is at, and you look at the roster makeup and their coaching staff, and we've talked a lot about the ceiling versus floor conversation with this team. Miami has the opportunity this year to kind of repeat and say, hey, 10-2 isn't this magical year where we needed the number one overall draft pick to get us there. And, and a 1,000-yard rusher and Damian Martinez and Elijah Arroyo and all these different guys. It's, hey, this is just what you can expect from this program year in and year out. That is what, the U, for all intents and purposes, that's what the U being back means. It's a big season for him, but that is absolutely what is at stake for this program this year, because over the course of Miami's history, you have that 10-win season or 11-win season or a really impressive 9-3 season. And then in between there, you got 6-7, 5-7, 7-6. Like you may sneak in an 8-5 win here and there, but 10-2 needs to be the absolute floor for this program if they're going to proclaim themselves as back. And that's, I think, what is at stake for Mario Cristobal as well.
On the way back, which is where they both are. I think that's the key. Let's dive a little bit into the offense, Trev, and let's begin with just a look back at what Miami was last year. I don't think people realize how dynamic this Miami offense was last year. Outside of the Georgia Tech game, the only game they lost or even were threatened to lose because of the offense, I would argue, is the Georgia Tech game where they didn't play great. In their other two losses, they scored 38 and 41 points. Now, the offense went through stretches where it didn't answer some Syracuse scores. I understand that, but I don't care. If your standard is if we don't score every possession, we're going to lose, then you're not the problem. You still scored 38 points on the road against a top 25 team. That should be good enough to win. But you look at Miami last year, Trev, they had ranked number one in the country in points per game, number one in the country in yards per game, yards per play. They ranked number one in the country in third down offense, number one in passing offense. They also ranked in the top 10 in yards in 30-plus yards yard gains for offense, yards per carry, fewest tackles for loss allowed per game. They also ranked in the top 10 in red zone offense, 30-plus yard completions, quarterback rating, completion percentage. This is an offense that was good, and they weren't just good at throwing the ball. They were good at running the ball also. As you can see, the 31, ranking 31st in rushing yards, whatever. It's the number below it. The yards per rush, that's the key that shows me your efficiency. The 188.9 just tells me your volume, how much you run it. Then the one below tells me, are you explosive? Are you dynamic? They had a three-headed monster last year. It's going to be a different three-headed monster this year with Damian Martinez going pro. So they were a dynamic offense under Shannon Dawson last year. The question is going to be, can they maintain that with everything that they've lost offensively? And you're talking about your Heisman Trophy finalist quarterback who was a number one overall draft pick. You're talking about a 1,000-yard receiver in Damian Martinez. Yes, Mark Fletcher and Jordan Lyle are good players. Saying Damian Martinez is a big loss doesn't mean that the guys that are coming back suck. But my point is, weren't you even better when you had those two and Damian Martinez? Like, you can't just pretend like that's not a loss. Doesn't mean you won't be okay. You lose Xavier Strepo, your number one receiver. You lose Jacoby George. Number two, Isaiah Horton transfers to Bama. He was your number three receiver. Elijah Arroyo gets drafted. He was your number four receiver. Sam Brown was your number five receiver. Damian Martinez was your number six receiver. Your top returning pass catcher from last year of guys that did it in a Miami uniform was Elijah Lofton, who had 9 catches for 155 yards and a touchdown, the tight end, who's a talented player. That's a lot of production to lose. Markel Bell struggled early, ended up being in rotation with Jalen Rivers. He's gone. You had, their center's name was Zach Carpenter was their center last year, correct? I believe he was their starting center. He's gone. Defensively, they lose their whole secondary. That's not so much a problem as much as it's just you got new guys stepping in. And so, I mean, you lose Malinoa. Francisco Malinoa, linebacker, is a very good football player. So there are definitely some departures that you have to replace. But you're replacing with talented younger players, portal guys, like a lot of people. The question isn't, will Miami have talent? The question is, will all the pieces be able to come together in game one for them to be able to beat Notre Dame? And if they don't beat Notre Dame, can those pieces then come together by game 4 against Florida? The Notre Dame game is not going to make or break Miami season if they lose. Be competitive. That's really the minimum of what you need to be. If you win the game, that's awesome for them, not for us, but for them, it's awesome for them. But as long as you kind of compete with Notre Dame, it's then the Florida game that's going to say, okay, now is when the evaluation piece starts. But that's going to be the question for Miami is how quickly can all of these new pieces come? You got a new D coordinator, got a brand new secondary. You brought in the linebacker from Rutgers to kind of step in and hopefully replace Malinois. You've got some talented linemen coming back. Ruben Bain's going to be healthy. He wasn't really healthy last year, but you also have some guys you lost. This is a team that's got a lot of holes to plug, especially offensively. And I get that, hey, the running backs are still going to be good. They are. Offensive line still going to be talented. They are. This is a brand new passing game operation. Brand new quarterback, brand new group of receivers who didn't get to work together for the spring. And as Notre Dame fans, we saw what that's like last year. We saw it take Riley Leonard, who missed all of spring with an injury, a whole month plus of the season to figure out how to hit receivers. I mean, like, it doesn't just happen overnight. Can Miami do it quicker? Well, maybe. Carson Beck's a more natural passer than Riley Leonard was. But I think that's going to be the question for Miami is how quickly can they get this team to gel, especially on the offensive side of the ball?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the benefits that Riley Leonard had last season was the fact that he had a 3-year defensive coordinator to kind of lean on. And unfortunately, I like Corey Heatherman. I think that's a good hire, bringing him over from Minnesota. But I'm not shy to say that Corey Heatherman in year 1 at Miami is going to be as effective in game 1, year 3 of what Al Golden was. I mean, I think that's just logic. It's not my feelings of Corey Heatherman as a person. I think that's just how football works. It takes you a second to get going. And so
we saw that with Al Golden, Trev. We saw that with Al Golden in 2022. It took him a minute to figure out how to get all that talent to kind of go together.
Yeah, well, absolutely. The one benefit that is working in the favor of Miami's offense is we've seen, if there is a constant with Mario Cristobal, is this isn't just at Miami either. But when you are every season that Mario Cristobal has had and shown success at a program, he's had a veteran quarterback behind kind of steering the wheel of the offense. And he does have that this year at Miami with Carson Beck. Now, we can have debates about, is his ceiling as high as Cam Ward's? I don't think that it is. But in years where Mario Cristobal has had an experienced signal caller under center, think about Oregon when he had Justin Herbert. And last year when he had Cam Ward with Miami. This year he gets another veteran experienced quarterback. Because the one thing that I can say about Carson Beck is I don't think that there's going to be a stage that he plays on, barring the national championship, because he hasn't played in the national championship yet, that is going to be too big for him, especially in the regular season. And so I think that is something that works out in the benefit for Miami. But to your point, Brian, there are so many question marks about the people he's going to be facilitating the football to that gives me a little bit of pause around what this offense truly can be in week one.
That's the only question that there is with Miami's offense is how quickly can this all come together? Like, name me the team that had to replace as much as they have to replace that just jumped out week 1 and rolled against good teams. Name me that team. I don't know who that team is. So that's the aspect of it with Miami is if they lose to Notre Dame, Miami fans need to chill and be patient and say, let's see what happens against Florida. Now, if they beat Notre Dame, then they're going to be like, let's roll. You know, I mean, but if you lose that game, how quickly can they kind of figure it out and get that thing rolling? Because they're not going to be the number 1 ranked scoring offense in the country this year, in my opinion. The question is, what does their scoring offense look like in the last 6 games of the season? That's going to determine if they can finish, to your point, the way that they need to finish. Because I think 10-2, it sucks to say this, but it's the reality. And that is this, Trevor, is when you lose matters. It just does. And if Miami loses to Georgia Tech and Syracuse in September and then just steamrolls everybody the rest of the year and wins in November the way they won in September, maybe they're in the playoff last year. But unfortunately, I know we don't know. but that's going to be the key for me is you've got some big statement game opportunities in the second half of the season. You need to really make sure your offense is rolling by then. Then you got to hope that your defense can play well enough early to where you don't have to. Because here's the thing, their offense is not going to go out there and score 17 points a game in the first 4 games either. It's just, it's going to be hard for them to win 42 to 41 shootouts in September offensively. So their defense is going to have to kind of, not carry them, because I don't think that's the case, but just provide a little bit more resistance than they did in November of last year. That's going to be
absolutely. It's about finding the happy medium. The defense doesn't have to allow 10 points a game for them to be successful, but you also can't give up 42. The offense doesn't have to score 45 to win. That's fine. But in the same light, you also can't go through the first couple games of the season and only score 17, to your point. You brought up their schedule from last year, and we were talking about some of those close wins. And yes, hats off to them for finding a way to come back against Cal and blowing that lead open against Duke. That was a much closer game than what it seemed like last year, and being able to get that win over Virginia Tech. But what was the driver of that? It was Cam Ward and being able to throw for 300-400, close to 500 yards in every single one of those games. And so can you do that? Can you do that this year with this offense? Now, I don't know if they're going to be able to do it this year in game 1, consistent with what we've been talking about, but it is down the road of what does that start to look like when you are playing on the road against Florida State and on the road against SMU and you host NC State. That's when it has to come together. But it's those pieces that you have to backfill with transfer portal guys that leave a big question mark for me.
The thing they do have is an offensive line they can build around. And yes, there are some questions about the offensive line. I haven't checked in the last 2 days. I believe Ryan Rodriguez is still on pace to start at left guard. If not, it'll be Matthew McCoy. Rodriguez was slated to start last year. I think he got hurt in the opener, or was it right before the opener? Missed the season, so it's not like some kid out of nowhere. Obviously, you've got Brockermeyer at center, who transferred from TCU. He's been around a long time. Everybody else they have is massive offensive line. And when you look at the offensive line numbers last year, they ranked 4th in the country in fewest tackles for loss allowed. They weren't getting a lot of negatives. They ranked 6th in the country in yards per rush. Sacks allowed they ranked 13th in sacks allowed per game. And that's not meant to be 13.8. That's their yards per completion. But, they ranked 13th in the country in sacks allowed per game. Part of that was Cam Ward bailing them out, like Riley Leonard bailed Notre Dame's offensive line out at times last season. That's the area where they're going to have to get better is in pass pro, because Carson Beck is not Cam Ward athletically. He is a sit in a pocket and throw the football type of guy. So that's going to be a little bit different, but they should have a strong run game to kind of lean on early as Carson Beck gets comfortable in the system, which is very different than what he ran at Georgia. And he's not like a lot of transfers, like Devin Dampier going to Utah. He's going with his offensive coordinator. John Mateer going to Oklahoma. He's going with his offensive coordinator. Carson Beck's learning a brand new offense. Now he can do it, but it might take some time. So the question is, can they, just like we've talked about with Notre Dame, can they lean on the run game early as CJ Carr gets his feet wet a little bit? Similar type of thing here. Yes, Carson Beck has a lot of experience, but that was at Georgia. He was thrown to, let's be honest, folks, 2 years ago, he's thrown to Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey. It's a little different animal now. And so it might take him some time, but you've got that run game that you can lean on with Mark Fletcher, with Jordan Lyle, with Tramar Brown coming in from North Dakota State, where your hope is that you can use your size. And as Cooper's massive, Markel Bell's massive. Francis Maunoa at 6'6", 315 is not even in their top 2 of biggest offensive linemen, just sheer size-wise. So that's what they're going to have to rely on early. And then as the pass game gets more comfortable, as they start to play more together, as the young guys get more opportunities, then you hope by the middle of the season you're rolling. Really, what if I were to set a benchmark on it, Trev, based on the way that their schedule looks, I feel like Florida State is when you should start to see it start to click a little bit, but then Louisville coming out of that second bye, that's when, if you're Miami, you're hoping that it really starts to take off and roll. And you're going to need it because SMU can score, Syracuse can score, NC State can score. We'll see about Virginia Tech and Pitt. They've got some potential. Both have quarterbacks that are very good. Kyron Drones, when he's on, Virginia Tech can move the ball and score on you, as Miami found out last year. And then when Eli Holstein is healthy, that offense can score. So there's some teams that they're going to face. There's some, like, you look at their quarterback schedule, who they got to face as we transition to the defense in November. You've got to face Kevin Jennings, Steve Angeli, CJ Bailey, Kyron Drones, and Eli Holstein, barring, assuming everyone's healthy. That is not an easy November stretch. So even if your defense is vastly improved, you're not holding all those teams to 13 points. So your offense is going to need to really be clicking by the time you get to that point in time in the season.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about the side of the ball last year that gave up an absurd amount of points in certain games. I mean, you gave up 45 points to Louisville in a loss. You gave up over 30 to Cal. You gave up over 30 to Virginia Tech. And we obviously know some of the pitfalls of the Syracuse game at the end of the regular season. Now, there's going to be some things about this group that I look at these numbers, and it's some of it you take it with a grain of salt, because they do have an entirely new secondary and they do have a brand new defensive coordinator. There are some inferences that you can make with Corey Heatherman coming over from Minnesota, but it's different personnel than what he had when he was with the Gophers in 24. And so when I break some of these numbers down and I'm looking, I mean, they were giving up 25.3 points per game. I think some of those numbers were padded by some of the lesser opponents that they played on their schedule, because when they got into Power 5 play, with the exception of Florida, they were giving up quite a bit of points week in and week out. I mean, if you remember going back and watching that Louisville game, it was essentially 7-on-7. There was no point in having defense on the field. If each team wanted to put up 60, I think that they could have. And so their points per game.
Virginia Tech did that. Cal did that. Keep going, Trev.
I mean, you look at their points per game, even their rank at 68 still doesn't do it that much justice.
Yeah, because they gave up 9 combined points to Florida A&M and Ball State. They gave up 15 points to South Florida. After that, they gave up 34 to Tech, 38 to Cal, 45 to Louisville, 14 to a Florida State team whose offense was terrible, 31 to Duke, 28 to Georgia Tech, 14 to a Wake Forest team whose offense was terrible last season, 42 to Syracuse, and 42 to Iowa State. Now, not every single one of those scores was on the defense, but you get the point. I mean, if you look at from the Virginia Tech game on down, they had 2 games where they held opponents under 5 yards a play. Actually, let's be more specific. There was only 2 games, Florida State and Wake, who both were awful, where they held opponents to less than 5.78 yards per play. They gave up 5.97 against Tech, 7.6 against Cal, 6.2 against Louisville, 6 against Duke, 5.8 against Georgia Tech, 6.8 against Syracuse, and then 6.2 against Iowa State. And so by the way, we talk about Notre Dame not having Haynes King. Should be reminded that Haynes King did not play the entire game against Miami either. He went 6 of 6 for 32 yards in that game and ran the ball a lot, but only threw the ball 6 times in that game, just coming back off of an injury. So the defense is going to have to play better. Now, here's the thing about Corey Heatherman. So there's 2 aspects of this. One is, guy's only been a coordinator for 1 year. That's it, 1 year. He was with Greg Schiano for 2 years at Rutgers. That's a pretty good mentor from a coaching standpoint. He's only been a coordinator for 1 year. But in that 1 year, he took over a Minnesota defense that gave up, I believe, more points than the one he's inheriting in Miami. So as you see, Miami gave up 25.3 points per game. The Minnesota defense he inherited was giving up 26.7. Last year, Miami's defense gave up 327.2 yards per game, 5.3 yards per play. The defense he inherited from Minnesota in 2023 was giving up 368.4 and 5.95 yards per play. Like, he stepped into a situation, first year there, brand new players, brand new situation, and turned them around. Now, it's made a little bit easier by the fact that he played in a Big Ten that had like 4 good offenses, and I don't think they played all but maybe 1 or 2 of them. But still, they didn't play great offenses the year before as part of the Big Ten West either. So he's shown that Trev, we say, he's first year, new guys. I get all that. But he inherited a bunch of new guys last year at Minnesota as well, and was a big part of the turnaround there. And then in year 1 at Minnesota, they go from 26.7 points per game to 16.9. They go from 368.4 yards per game and 5.95 yards per play, down to 285.7 and 4.76. Now, the other thing, too, is the counter to that is they were really good on defense 2 years prior. Joe Rossi had built a really good defensive situation in Minnesota, and then it just kind of bottomed out his last year. And Corey Heatherman quickly got him back on track. So I do think you are hiring someone who has experience stepping into a new situation with new players at a new place, and inheriting a situation where a turnaround was needed, and he got it done. Can he do that at Miami? I think he can. For this show, the question is more of, but can he do it in week one? This has been my whole thing with Miami, and some of my disagreements with Miami fans, how they're just going to roll Notre Dame, and maybe they do, but it's like, you guys are setting yourselves up for potential disappointment if you think this team is going to look like peak, rolling, everything is great in week one with a bunch of new players and a new defensive system. If it doesn't look the way you think it will in week one, be patient. Take a deep breath. You don't leave the state of Florida till November. Let it play out, because there are a lot of good pieces in place. And if they are able to beat Notre Dame in week one and maybe be ahead of schedule, now you start to say this team is going to be a problem for people throughout the year. But they don't need to necessarily be in peak midseason form by game one. It's just eventually it'll have to get there. Will they be able to figure it out? And will Miami be Minnesota? We're going to find out. We're going to find out here real quick, Trev. But even last year at Minnesota, I mean, yeah, it worked well early, but that's because they didn't play anybody. Played North Carolina, Rhode Island, Nevada, Iowa, Michigan in their first 5 games. First real offense they played last year was USC, who, went for 5.7 yards per play. So it's just how quickly can he get it done? That's going to be the question. I'm confident he's going to turn it around. I still know how quickly it's going to be.
Yeah, agreed. And some of the improvements that he's going to have to make on defense are marginal. I mean, you look at what they did last year, and the stats are a little skewed. They were top 20 in the country in rushing yards, but you go and you go reflect how some of those games played out. Not a lot of teams, when they got down 21-0 against that high-powered Miami offense, were really looking to run the football that much. And so how much of that was their run defense was that good? How much of it was, their opposing offenses weren't really looking to establish the ground game much, being down 2-3 scores going into halftime. You go and you look at their passing defense. A lot of it was feast or famine. They were able to pick the ball off quite a bit. I mean, you ranked top 30 in the country in interceptions, picked off opposing quarterbacks 14 times in 13 games. It's pretty decent. You also gave up a whole bunch of passing touchdowns. You gave up 22 in 13 games that ranked 92nd in the country. Red zone defense as a whole in terms of scoring wasn't that bad. I mean, not great, not ideal, but you ranked 66th in the country. But then you look at how many touchdowns they allowed in the red zone,
right,
and you ranked outside of the top 100. So what does that tell me? That means that the majority of the time when teams got inside of the red zone on you, you're allowing a touchdown. It's not great. Mm-hmm. But point being, the adjustments that Corey Heatherman has to make, he doesn't have to completely take this defense from, outside of the top 100 in every major category to them being a top 25 defense in every major category for Miami to have success this season. But Brian, it goes back to what you said. How quickly can he close that gap from being outside of the top 50 to inside of the top 40 in week one? It's a huge question.
Yes. It is. The other thing is we don't know how good his defense is going to have to be in week one. Because if you go back to the offense, the question is, okay, will Shannon Dawson be able to keep this thing rolling anything close to this? I mean, if they're just a touchdown off and 60 yards off against Notre Dame where they were last year, that's still a lot of points and a lot of yards that Notre Dame is going to have to match in order to win this game on the road, most likely in rain. So I think that's the other piece of it as well. But I think there needs, I don't expect the defense to be, or the offense to be as good as it was in 2024. I don't expect the defense to be as bad as it was in 2024. So the question is, where do they meet in the opener against Notre Dame? That's going to be the question. Eventually, I think they figure it out. I think the offense rises back up to a degree and the defense keeps going. But, how will it be in week one? How does it happen by Florida? Does it happen by Florida State? Does it happen by SMU? Louisville, I should say. that's going to ultimately determine what Miami's season is going to look like, because they can sustain a loss in Notre Dame and be fine. We've talked about this when we did our Miami preview. So look, they've just got to go 1-1 against Miami and against Notre Dame and Florida. If they go 1-1 against Notre Dame and Florida, they're entering October as a top 10, borderline top 10 team, as long as that one loss is close. Because you've got South Florida, you've got let's go back to their schedule. You've got South Florida, Bethune-Cookman. You beat Florida. You got then 2 byes around the Florida State game. It's not till October 17th when you're hosting Louisville, and then you don't leave your state till November 1st at SMU. That if they can handle Louisville, there's a good chance they're going into that November 1st matchup against SMU as a top 10 football team if they can go 1-1 in their matchup against Notre Dame and Florida. And if you're Miami, you're kind of better off losing. If you're going to lose one, you're better off losing to Notre Dame because it's so much earlier.
Yep.
I mean, forget the recruiting implications and all that stuff. It's just better because it's earlier. I mean, look, Notre Dame went from losing to Northern Illinois in week 2, dropping all the way down to 19. They finished their regular season number 5. You lose early, you got plenty of time to overcome it. And so we're going to find out if they can do that. But they've got to go 1-1. Looking at this team, they've got to go 1-1 against the 2 big dogs they play in the first stretch of the season before their first bye. I think that's going to be the key.
Agreed. Well, Brian, let's get into some particulars then about this defense and what are some of the things that we like about it. We know that one of the strengths of this unit will be their defensive line at the top. You have Ruben Bain, you have Justin Scott, you have Akeem Mesidor coming back. I mean, there's a lot of good pieces at the top. I have some questions around the depth of their defensive line, but at the top of their depth
Especially
chart,
up the middle.
Yes, but at the top of their depth chart, they got some dudes on the defensive line. It's going to be a really good matchup to watch between Notre Dame's offensive line and Miami's defensive line. That's one of the strengths of this defense for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it really does. They're a lot like Notre Dame, and Marcus Freeman talked about that in the press conference today for Notre Dame. Is like they're building kind of like we're building, which is around the lines. And you mentioned Ruben Bain, great freshman year in 2023, just outstanding player. Huge things expected of him last year. Didn't live up to expectations because he was banged up. Honestly, I mean that's really what hurt him last year. Is he went from a freshman season where he had 12.5 tackles for loss and 7.5 sacks in 13 games to a sophomore season where he had 5.5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks in 9 games. Just wasn't healthy all year. And I think I felt like they he had a little bit of bad weight on him last year. I think he's working that off. I think he's he reminds me of a more explosive version of Nick Scorton. He's not as experienced as Nick Scorton was, the kid that Notre Dame faced against A&M last year. Remember, he was like 6'4", 285. He was that big guy. They're talking about him being a potential first-round pick. I think he ended up going in round 2, right? And so, like, very similar player to him, but I think Ruben Bain's a little bit more explosive, a little bit more powerful than Nick Scorton was. He's an absolute force that you have to deal with. You have to have a plan for. And how well Notre Dame can handle him and keep him from really taking over a game is going to be key. You've got Akeem Mesidor as a veteran player on the other side of the ball. You've got a couple young guys, Armando Blunt, who's a redshirt sophomore, Marquise Lightfoot, who's a true sophomore, who was a highly ranked recruit, as part of that rotation. You get David Blay in as from Louisiana Tech. Justin Scott, former highly ranked player. Ahmed Moten's a solid player. There's questions after that about the depth at defensive tackle. And for Notre Dame, if you're looking at it from a matchup standpoint, is like you got to be able to hold up on the inside. Just don't get dominated on the perimeter. That's going to be the key. And for Notre Dame last year, when they like the Ohio State game, they got beat convincingly on the edge. Against Georgia, they didn't get convincingly beat on the edge. A little bit up the middle, but not on the edge. Penn State, first half they did, second half they didn't. And the offense started to roll. Texas A&M, they handled it. Other games they didn't. And it's going to be the same thing here, Trev. I like the edge pressure. I like the athleticism. I like the size. This isn't just a bunch of, small, twitchy, athletic guys. This is a defensive line that has some size to it as well, as we talked about with Ruben Bain. Akeem Mesidor's bigger than Ruben Bain. If you look at their depth chart, he's even bigger than him. So they're gonna have some size. Question is going to be linebacker. Obviously, you got to replace Noah, but you got Mo Torre, who transferred in from Rutgers. He was hurt last year. Didn't play last year, was a really good player at Rutgers the year before in 2023. Wesley Bassaint is obviously coming back. Raul Aguirre is a kid who I liked a lot coming out of high school. I had as a top 100 recruit. He'll be part of that linebacker rotation. I think the front 6, front 7 is going to be really sound minimum, potentially impactful if they can figure out what's going on in the D tackles, because I'm not worried about what they lost off the edge last year, honestly. Tyler Barron was very productive. You may disagree with this, Trevor. I thought Tyler Barron had a lot of empty stats last year. I wasn't impressed with his performance overall. I thought, he had, I'm looking at the numbers now and it kind of backs up my point. He had 7 sacks in the first 3 games. Actually, 7.5, tackles for loss in the first 4 games against Florida, Florida A&M, Ball State, and South Florida. He then went, not until Syracuse did he have more than a half a tackle for loss the rest of the way. Had a half a tackle for loss for no yards lost against Louisville, half a tackle for loss for only 1 yard loss against Duke, same against Georgia Tech, none against Virginia Tech, none against Cal, none against Florida State, none against Wake Forest. Then he has 2 against Syracuse and then none against Iowa State. His numbers look good. The film didn't impress me. And so I wasn't a big fan of him. I think he's going to be one of those addition by subtraction guys. If I'm just being honest, he was a kid, if you remember, went to Louisville. They kind of booted him off the team because he started rumor was he went there, then he wanted more money, and then he goes to Miami. He was a guy he's not in it for he's not down for the struggle with what you're trying to accomplish as a program. He was a mean guy. Well, he's gone. I think you've got guys that are more built, like bought into the culture. That's a lot of what Mario Cristobal, he talked a lot about that last year, about, are you guys really here for the right reasons? And I think they got rid of some of those guys because not every departure is a loss. You know what I'm saying? And that's the one thing I feel like about Alabama. Not everybody that leaves that's talented is a loss. The more kid at safety. Yeah, he was talented. Did you watch how he lost his mind half the time in games? Remember the time he kicked the ball, losing his mind at the end of Vanderbilt game? Like, sometimes it's good to get rid of a talented football player that's not bought into the culture. That was so obvious. I mean, you're just watching. Look, I don't care what you say about Lance Guidry. He got that job for a reason. He wasn't some idiot that didn't know how to coach defense. I don't think he knew how to handle the players at Miami. The culture was broken. There's guys, you're just like, how is that hole that wide open? Like, what are they doing? Like, that was just guys not bought in. That wasn't a lack of talent. That's going to be the big question here is, can they establish a better culture? And I think when you look at the guys they brought in and the guys that are coming back, they're relying a lot more at certain spots on their guys as opposed to a rebuild in the front 7. I mean, Blaze really the only significant transfer they're bringing in from last year in the front. Torrey at linebacker is hungry. Like, he's got something to prove because he missed last year. Couldn't go to the NFL because he missed last year. He's got something to prove. I think this front 7 is going to be good. The question for Miami is, what are they going to go in the secondary? And yes, I know they're talented players, but there's basically 4 new starters, and almost the entire depth chart is new guys. That doesn't just come together in game 1. There's guys there. Xavier Lucas from Wisconsin, very talented player. Right? I mean, you and I have talked about this. I mean, he's a talented player. Zechariah Poyser is a talented player. Charles Brantley at corner. Ethan O'Connor from Washington State, talented players. This is game 1 of these guys all come together learning a new defense. And the problem with that, like when we talk about Notre Dame in 2022, is who are the veterans you're learning the defense from? We talked about this last year, the Mike Denbrock offense. It's like, well, who's the veteran that the newcomers are learning it from? Well, I'm learning at the same time as you are. It's year 2 of a system when you really see that start to take off, because you now have that established core of veterans that can say, hey, new guy, here's what coach wants here. Here's what he thinks there. They're all learning it. And that's why I think it might take a little bit of time.
Yeah, I mean, their only returning starter at cornerback is O.J. Frederick. I'm not sure how to say his last name, but O.J. Frederick is the only returning corner that they have. Their entire 2-deep is made up of transfer portal players. High ceiling guys, high potential guys, but can that all come together in one offseason with a first-year defensive coordinator? I think that remains a question. 4 of their 5 starters projected on our lads are transfers in the secondary. it's a major question mark. And I know I've seen a lot of Miami fans talk about how, yeah, they're all transfers, but they're better players. It's like, maybe. But sometimes if you don't come together collectively as a unit, secondary being a unit, there can be some communication issues, blown coverages. I mean, blown coverages have been an issue for some secondaries when they return almost all of their starters, but they have a new defensive coordinator. You add every single one of them except for one being a transfer portal guy in that mix, there's a lot of question marks on how the back end of this defense is going to do, and that was their biggest question coming into this season. The thing that hurt the thing that hurt them last year was the back end of their defense. It's why they blew the lead to Syracuse. It's why the Cal took a big lead on them last year. And now that is still their biggest remaining question mark for their defense going into this season as well. So I'm not sure what that's going to look like. My stance in general is just I don't feel overly confident when any unit is made up entirely of transfer portal players. Now, there's some that can kind of get through more than others. I guess if I were to choose, I would rather have my secondary be made up entirely of secondary players and transfer portal players and my offensive line. But ideally, you're not in that spot at all. So, with Miami secondary, that is the biggest question mark for them, especially with some of the teams that they have coming up on their schedule. But in terms of this week, I guess if you're Miami, you have an ideal matchup with Notre Dame because they're not perceived as a downfield passing team. So if there is a game for your secondary to kind of get their feet wet a little bit, I guess you could say that Notre Dame would be that ideal team. Now, as we're going to talk about later on in the week, I don't think that you can really hang your hat on that too much with the change of personnel groupings here. Mike Denbrock going into year 2, but yeah, their secondary is a major question mark.
It is. So when you look at this team, Trev, what can we say about Miami? Big year for Mario Cristobal. Very important year for Mario Cristobal. Can they at least say, hey, we've at least raised the floor to here now? Can they or even go further? How quick they're to me one of the test cases for can you build a championship team in a year through the portal? Like they're like I'd say them, maybe Oklahoma. There's some teams that people are a lot of hype around that are like basically completely rebuilding through the portal that some people think maybe have a chance to make a run this season. I don't think, maybe Oregon, but Oregon still has a lot of core players and high school recruits they're building around, but they're another example. Miami is arguably the number one test case for can in a year you completely rebuild vast swaths of your roster through the portal and compete for championships. Ohio State didn't do that last year. They plugged in some quarterback, running back, safety, center. Like that was it. They were joining in a veteran core of players. Notre Dame, portal was very important in Notre Dame last year, but again, it was a quarterback, couple receivers, a D-end who didn't get a sack until the Georgia game, and a nickel, and your number 3 safety. Like very important players, but and kicker, but there was no depth chart that was being rebuilt through the portal the way that Miami, or through young players the way that Miami is with their receiving core and their secondary. Like that's the question, is can they win that way? Now, what I like about what Mario Cristobal is doing, he's doing that because it's needed, but he's then trying to recruit high school kids to not have to rely on this all the time. And I think that's what Brian Kelly's doing at LSU. Yeah, he had to go to the portal for certain spots, but if you look at what they're doing recruiting wise, they're trying to not have to go to the portal again next year for a bunch of receivers. They're trying to bring in highly ranked guys. And can they do that? We're going to find out. But Miami is a test case for, can you build a championship team through the portal in a year where you have to basically rebuild multiple position groups almost exclusively through portal players or portal players plus unproven guys? That's going to be the question for them. Good foundation in certain spots, but that's what they're trying to rebuild in other areas. We're going to find out if they can do it.
Yeah, FanDuel kind of has them right in the middle You know, they right now their over/under win total on FanDuel is 9.5, and they're erring more on the side of under 9.5, so they think they'll be around that 8-9 win range. But then their odds to make the playoffs, they're more likely to not make the playoffs than they are to make the playoffs this year. So Miami's a team that I think a lot of experts think that they're going to kind of have a similar year to what they had last year. Kind of drop some of the bigger games. You win some of the games that you're supposed to. You're going to be in the playoff hunt, but ultimately you're not going to make it. That's kind of what FanDuel thinks right now of what's on the docket for Miami this season. But it is a major question. And there are some questions around, can you bring all of this together? And specifically for Notre Dame, can you bring all of it together in week one? I think that's the biggest question.
Yeah, I do think that Miami is a team that if they can, like I've said since the summer, you and I have had a little bit of a disagreement on Miami's ceiling this year, or floor as a team. We don't disagree on their ceiling. We've disagreed on their floor. I think that's going to be determined by how quickly can Corey Heatherman get that defense playing sound football. Like, that's all they have to do. When you have talent, you don't have to be super creative and super exotic. You just have to get guys to line up, do your job, and do it fast. That's it. Because at the end of the day, Miami's going to have more talent on their roster than at least 8 of the or 9 teams on their schedule. At least. You could debate Notre Dame. I don't think it's debatable. I think Notre Dame has a better roster. Miami fans don't want to hear that, but they do. You could debate, because my question would be then, I don't even get into that. They don't. It's not dramatically different. It's not like Notre Dame's here and Miami's way down there, like they're closer to Northern Illinois than they are Notre Dame. And I use that, intentionally using Northern Illinois. But they're not to where Notre Dame is. After that, it's debatable with Florida. It's debatable with Louisville. It's debatable with SMU. They have a better roster than Florida State. I don't think that's debatable. They have a better roster than Pitt. They have a better roster than Virginia Tech. I think there's a lot of teams on their schedule, Trev. You look at them and say, well, they've got a better roster than that team. I don't think that's really debatable. They got a better roster than Bethune-Cookman, South Florida, Florida State, Stanford, Syracuse, NC State. That's debatable. Virginia Tech and Pitt. So at least 8 teams, in my opinion, you could say they have a better roster. Then there's others that are debatable, where you could pick Miami against Florida. You could pick Miami against Louisville. You could pick Miami against SMU and say that they're better. But the point is, can you go out there and beat the teams that you're supposed to, and then go at least 2-2 against the teams where the talent is more on an even footing? That's what Miami has to do this season. And if they're going to do that, it's about getting your talent to play to its full potential, which means you didn't bring in Corey Heatherman to say, we're going to run all these crazy exotic coverages and these crazy exotic schemes. It's see ball, get ball. We have talent. Go let it play. Yeah. Don't give up the big mistakes. Make teams grind you out, because they're going to have a hard time doing that against this front seven. Don't give up the 60-yard run. Smash, no gain, -2, +3, 70. Like incomplete, 4-yard completion, 60. That's what Miami has to avoid. Just play sound football. That when they can start doing that consistently, that's when this defense starts to take off, and that's when they get dangerous. For the ACC, you better hope that doesn't happen until after they've caught a couple L's. But if that happens before the Louisville game, then they're gonna be in the ACC title game. I fully believe that. I think, weren't they? I think I had Clemson and Miami, didn't I? Or who was my ACC team? Do you remember?
I think you had SMU.
SMU? I thought you had SMU. I did have SMU. Yeah. I had Miami third. I had Clemson and SMU. You are correct. So that's where I'm at, Trev. That's where I see this. That's where I see this Hurricane team. I think they have potential, but there's just a lot of question marks that they got to get answered. A lot of question marks. How quickly does it happen? That's going to determine if this is a team that is once again in the playoff hunt in November, because they went into November last year, Trev, in control. They were one of the few teams in college football that went into the month of November with their destiny 100% in their hands. They were the only team in the ACC that, in my opinion, had that. Because if SMU ran the table, they were going to have to eventually play Miami in the title game. And they needed to win out. They couldn't afford another loss. Like Miami, it wins out, they're in. they get to the ACC title game with no losses, they're in no matter what. If SMU drops another game in November, they don't control their own destiny in the ACC title game. Don't get it twisted. The committee would have bypassed their, we're not going to punish you for losing the title game if it was a 2-loss SMU losing a third game. You think they're going to leave a 3-loss SMU team, or they're going to put a 3-loss SMU team in the playoff over a 3-loss Bama team? I don't think so. I do not think so. I don't think they're putting that 3-loss SMU team in over 2-loss Miami. They're not going to do it. Miami was the only team, in my opinion, that went into November in the ACC last year with 100% of their destiny in their hands. They couldn't get it done. If they go into November this year in the same boat, I think you have to feel confident they're going to be in better position to be there, because I would argue that they're not relying as much on one player to get that done. As like Carson Beck may be a great player, but he's not going to carry them the same way that Cam Ward did. He's not going to play Superman football. He's going to drop back, throw the ball, get to the ball to the playmakers, and they got to go make plays. And I think that'll make them a more stable football team than one where you've got Superman, where if a team like Georgia Tech can contain him, you can beat him. Not a lot of people could do it, but but enough to knock him out of the playoffs. So that's where I think Miami's at, Trevor. It's gonna be fun to watch. I know this is gonna sound crazy coming from Notre Dame guy, but I think college football is better. They're one of those teams. There's like 10 to 12 teams where I'm like, college football is better when that team is good. It's more
100%.
entertaining when that team is good. And Miami's one of those teams.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately for Notre Dame fans, it's a lot of those teams are kind of their rivals. I do think college football is better when Michigan's good and when USC is good and when Miami's good and when Florida State is good. Just kind of those typical OG college football teams that you think of. But I'm with you. It's going to be a fun year. There's a lot on their plate. But the benefit for Miami fans is a lot of the questions that they have, a lot of other teams share too. So they're not alone in that boat. It's just going to be a question of how quickly can it come together. And that is one that I'm going to be excited to watch as the season goes on.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, listen, folks, that is going to do it for part 3 of today's show. Don't go anywhere. We are going to wrap up today's show with a mailbag, so be sure to get your questions in. But before we get there, be sure to hit that like button. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Hit that notification bell. Share this podcast with your friends and family, anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. Also, be sure to subscribe to our CFB Nation channel. As the season progresses, we're going to be rolling out a lot more content on that channel as well, kind of focusing more big picture college football, not so much Notre Dame centric, but obviously we will be talking about Notre Dame on that channel as well. But as always, the best way to support what we do here, subscribe to the premium message boards, boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, in the final part of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by FanDuel, we are going to end today with a little bit of a mailbag segment. You guys know how we roll here. If you guys want your questions set aside, be sure to put MB or a little mailbox emoji to make sure that Brian and I set that question aside. But if you want yours bumped to the top, you can always put a super chat in there as well. And I believe we have one in there from Tyler Evans.
We have 3 super chats here today. So Tyler's was actually second. AST12321 had the first super chat for us today. Thank you very much for that.
Appreciate the super chat. Guys, I'm tired of seeing jokes comparing Miami's orange out to normal prison jumpsuits. Florida convicts don't normally wear orange, so they're actually mixing it up.
That's a very petty way to start the show today, and I kind of dig it. I haven't seen any of those jokes. Is that really a thing, or is he just being funny?
No, that's a thing, because Miami Stadium is doing an orange out.
Okay.
So yeah,
that just sounds
kind of
lame. I haven't heard that. They're just kind of diving right into that expert.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I love to start the show.
Another super chat from Tyler Evans. Thank you, Tyler. What did you think of the week 0 games?
So weird. I mean, there was really only one game that I really was excited to see. And honestly, it was kind of ruined by just bad weather. And that's a little bit of my concern about this Notre Dame Miami game. You watch that first half, and neither one of those teams could do a thing offensively because of the rain. Second half, the weather got better, and all of a sudden the offenses started moving the ball, and it was the game we thought we were going to get. The second half was the game we thought we were going to get. And, honestly, look, it came down to K-State had multiple chances to win that game. Dropped picks, dropped passes, shaky play calling in the second half. There were just some nice play calls, got you some big plays, but they were kind of big player bust in the second half. Avery Johnson had some throws where you're just like, dude, you're in year 2 as a starter. You got to hit that. You got to hit those throws. I thought it was a missed opportunity. And look, I texted you this in the middle of the show or middle of the game, Trev. Rocco Beck's a weird quarterback to evaluate because I'm like, he's not accurate. He doesn't have like a monster arm. He's a good athlete, but it's not like he's Lamar Jackson running around there. Dude just makes plays, though. Like, he'll make some throws. You're like, that's a top quarterback in the country? Like, really? And then it's like, but then it's 4th and 9, and he's got to throw a dart, and he makes it, or he's got to scramble for it. Dude just makes plays, man. Like, he's not a sexy quarterback. He's not like, man, that's what I'm going to teach my son to throw with those mechanics. Like, it's not that. It's just, guy just plays, man. He just makes plays, and that's what makes Iowa State good. And so that was my takeaway from that game. I was disappointed with Kansas State's offense, and then losing Dylan Edwards on the first play on special teams. I think that hurt K-State as well, because then they were just trying to play with the hammer of Joe Jackson. They didn't have the dynamic running ability. They did some things with Jace Brown. I told y'all Jace Brown could run. I told y'all that. I just didn't think they did enough to try to get him the ball in certain situations, and just like they did the reverse, the deep ball. But there's just some more things they should have done to set him up. I wasn't in love with the play calling from K-State in the second half, to be honest with you. But you got to give credit to Iowa State, man. They battled. They grinded it out. Both teams had some missed opportunities after turnovers and, not converting on 4th down. I mean, some of K-State's 4th down play calling was just like, you already did that. You got it last time. You're really trying to go back to that well again? Okay. But, I mean, K-State was the tougher team. Mentally and physically, they were the tougher team, and that's why they won the football game.
Yeah, I mean, big picture from week 0, Kansas State, Iowa State was everything about that game was ugly. The field was ugly. Like, there were no white lines on the football field 5 minutes into kickoff. Yeah. I mean, it also played a factor into where they were spotting the ball at certain times. Like, it was kind of literally just a guessing game, depending on what down or distance it was. But Kansas State had no idea what to do on offense the second Dylan Edwards got hurt. The entire first half, yes, weather didn't help, but I could tell how much of their game plan that day was going to involve Dylan Edwards and getting him the football in different ways. And then that kind of turned into trying to get J.C. Brown the football in a bunch of different ways. I thought that was ugly. And Iowa State, I said it before the game, I thought Kansas State was going to win, and I didn't really know how to evaluate Iowa State because a lot of their wins last year were just ugly. Like, there were a lot of games where I didn't think that they were going to, but just the ball kind of bounced their way, and they did, and that's Iowa State. And so I guess I should have checked the weather forecast before the game. But yeah, that was my thoughts on Iowa State, Kansas State. Outside of that, the second half I was a little bit happier with it, but overall I was a bit underwhelmed. Kansas looked phenomenal in week 1 against Fresno State.
Jalen Daniels was in peak Jalen Daniels form.
Yeah, he was dealing.
Now, he was absolutely dealing. It's still Fresno. I mean, like, not that they're a bad program. They're a solid program, but like, it's not like he did it against, TCU, Baylor, Iowa State, Utah or something. But like, that's the Jalen Daniels that we thought we were going to get after 2 years ago. But also, they ran the ball well. Like, they weren't like super dominant running the ball, but they were good running the football for game 1. And only 47 of those 207 yards were from Jalen Daniels. But I thought LaShawn Williams and Daniel Henshaw were pretty good. I thought the receivers, Cam Pickett, I mean, talking about a guy that can take a quick throw and do something with it. He did that against Fresno. So I thought they looked good. I thought they looked good, Trev. I'm with you. But then they needed that win. I mean, they needed that kind of early season home win. You're kicking off the new stadium. Somebody asked about that in the chat, by the way, about the donation for it. Wasn't the donation was for the stadium upgrades, right? And guess they're going to do the other half next year after the season or something like that. But they needed this kind of win, not just a win, but an impressive win to really build up some confidence. I thought their defense flew around pretty good too. That's probably the side of the ball that surprised me the most was how effective they were just completely shutting down Fresno. EJ Warner was running through it for his life half the game. I mean, he did not get a lot of time to throw the football. That's a solid Fresno offense. So I thought that was probably the bigger surprise for me was their defense was swarming in that game.
The Kansas defensive line looked legit. we talked about it in the ACC preview or the Big 12 preview, but I said that Kansas had one of the better defensive lines in conference, and it definitely showed. One game that was not impressive, well, depending on, I guess, which side of the ball you were on, that Stanford game was rough.
Look, even if you're a Hawaii fan, you're going to be like, dude, we did not look good in that win. Like,
no.
We did not look good in that win. Yeah, Stanford's – I mean, I said to you during the game, I was like, he's like the Joe Schmidt middle linebacker of Stanford quarterbacks. How does that – like, how bad must Elijah Brown have been? Or how dedicated are you to running a super complex system that you went with Ben Goldbranson as your starting quarterback? I mean, there's a reason he was no longer starting at Oregon State. I mean, he went 15 of 30 for 109 yards. Trevor, you can see it. Like, there's guys open. He just would not let it rip. He just would not. And some of the throws he did complete, like, he went 15 of 30. 5 of his throws were like, ugh. Like, just the completions I'm talking about were like, oh, my, what was that? Like, Sam Roush bailed him out a couple times. Like, the receivers are just kind of
Hawaii should have had 3 interceptions that game.
Oh, my
minimum.
Gosh. Yeah,
minimum.
It was bad. It was bad. Micah Ford impressed me, though. But, like, he averaged, like, less than 4 yards a carry.
Yeah.
But he was running hard. I mean, he's having to make guys miss, like, 3 yards in the backfield. He ran hard. Stanford does have legit, like, Power 5 running back room. And we didn't even see Chris Davis. But their receiving core is a problem. They have no speed on defense whatsoever. And their quarterback situation is a hot mess. They're a decent run blocking line. They're not a very good pass blocking line. It's going to be a long year for Stanford. I love the grittiness in that quarterback for Hawaii, though.
Man.
I mean, that's a tough kid, dude. Like, that's a little fella, and he battled. I thought he was done. The way he was limping around, I was like, there's no way this kid's going to be able to finish this game. He just kept battling. It was good to see. It was, that's what college is about, man.
Yeah.
It was good. Western Kentucky had a nice early season win over Sam Houston, Phil Longo and Sam Houston. And Maverick McIver, right? That's the transfer that they have, the quarterback transfer they have. He came from Abilene Christian, right? He was dealing in that game. Sam Houston's not that great of a team, but goodness gracious, he was lighting them on fire in that game. 33 of 51 for 401 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks. And Sam Houston battled. It just didn't have enough firepower to stay with Western Kentucky. But that was a good win. And then old Dan Mullen got his first career win at UNLV, and not an overly impressive win, Trev. Offense put up a lot of points, 232 passing yards, 307 rushing yards. And Alex Orgy's out there running around with spandex on. Those were not football pants. Did you see that? Like, dude, they were this far above his knee. Like, when we would go shells in college, we had way more pads on than that guy freaking had in that game. I don't think he had any lower body pads on. That's ridiculous. But, he's out there running around for them. They ran for 307 yards. Jaden Bradley had over 100 yards receiving. Idaho State, I believe, had a losing record in the FCS last year. So, yeah, nice win. You put up a lot of points, but you beat a team that was 5-7 at the FCS level last year and lost to Oregon State 38-15. Your defense has got to figure some stuff out real quick. Because Idaho State moved the ball on you way too effectively. They were up 10-0, Trev. They passed for 395 yards on UNLV. If not for 4 picks, who knows how that game would have gone? They threw 4 picks in that game. Like, that was not a fun day. Fun day if you only watch UNLV's offense. Not a fun day if you watched UNLV's defense.
Yeah.
It was not good. Not good. But that was it. Those are the games. It was a kind of day of football. But it was football, though. That's what matters. Football's better than no football, Trev.
Agreed. From Beezer 12, Washing Beard. If Notre Dame wins on Sunday outside of a championship, what streaks are left for Coach Freeman to end? Thank you for the super chat, Bees.
You've lost, 7 straight to Ohio State? Right? You've lost 2 straight to Bama. Those are a couple. If we're talking about streaks, that's a streak, right? More than one's a streak. You lost your most recent game against Texas, but you beat them the year before. You lost your most recent game to Oklahoma, beat them the year before. You've beat LSU the last 2 times you've played. I mean, I can't think of any other streaks that are out there that are more than you lost the last time you played. I think the ones that are important is, can you finally play and beat Ohio State? And can you beat Bama? And that one doesn't even mean as much as it used to, because it's not Nick Saban anymore. But it's still there until you do it. So I think championship obviously being there, but I think we've talked about, to Beezer's question, beating Miami on the road ends 1. Top 10 teams on the road ends 1. So some things end on Sunday if they win, but there's still a couple really big ones out there that they need to figure out a way to end before they're going to get to the championship. I think at some point in time, like this year, I'll be shocked if Notre Dame doesn't have to beat Bama or Ohio State in the playoffs if they want to win a championship. I'd be shocked if you don't catch at least one of them. I think we both have them playing Bama. Don't you have them playing Bama in the semis?
Mm-hmm.
I have them playing them in the championship game. So, yeah, I think that's another one. Here's one, Trev, from Garrett Medford. Garrett, thank you for the super chat very much. He says, Trev, what blitz percentage in the first 2 drives do you guys think Miami will throw at Carr? I'm leaning about 65%.
I'm actually going to, I guess if we're taking over-unders here, I would take the under on this. I think that Miami for the first 2 possessions is going to rely on their front 4 to get home. That's what, like we just got done talking about. I think that's kind of the crown jewel of their defense right now is their D-line. I understand where you're coming from here, Garrett, because, young quarterback, you want to start sending pressure. But look, all it's going to take is for one play between those first 2 drives where you send the house, and that is just begging for Jeremiah Love to catch one behind the defense, kind of like what Chris Tyree did in the Oklahoma State game in the Fiesta Bowl in 2021. I mean, look, I think that Miami for the first 2 possessions is going to try to get home with their front 4. I think good defensive coordinators don't want to blitz unless they want to, not if they have to. And I don't think it's going to be in Corey Heatherman's game plan to just try to send 6, 7, 8 guys every single play to try to light up Carr.
If you are a member of the premium board, the Champions Lounge at Irish Breakdown, boards@irishbreakdown.com, sign up if you haven't already. Watch the mid-zone breakdown I did, and watch what Notre Dame did to USC when they would bring those big blitzes. And you understand why the answer to playing CJ Carr is not to blitz him a ton. It's more so mix up the coverages, confuse him on the back end. That's more of what's going to happen. And then if you're in a situation where it's rainy, like the last thing you want to do is bring 8, 9 guys up in that first level. Because what happened on the one play that I broke down is USC walked up 2 inside backers. They had 4 guys stacked. And once Jadarian Price creased the first level, there was nothing between him and the end zone. 36-yard touchdown. Nothing between him and the end zone. That happened several times last year where it's like, once you get through the first level, there's nobody there because you were bringing pressure and it's gone. Yeah. One guy slips on a wet field because you brought 7, 8, and then all of a sudden it's your guys have to catch Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price, and the next defensive player that catches one of those 2 guys from behind will be the first defensive player that's caught one of those 2 guys from behind in a football game. So I think it's about keeping things in front of you. Because there's 2 ways to get CJ Carr to make mistakes. One is pressure him and all that kind of stuff. The other is mix up your looks, but make him run more plays. Don't let Notre Dame hit the big play. Make him run, because eventually the more plays he runs, he's a freshman, the more mistakes he's going to make. What can hurt you if you're Miami is you're out there bringing pressure, and then Notre Dame just creases one and 60-yard touchdown. Like, +2, -1, +3, 60. Like, if you're going to get gashed. We have 2 safeties in between Jeremiah Love and the end zone. Like you said, let your front 4 eat. Yeah, Notre Dame's going to get theirs, but when Notre Dame gets theirs, they get theirs when you blitz, it's the Notre Dame band's ready to start playing the fight song. Like, that's the danger of blitzing Notre Dame. So I think there will be like 3rd down pressures. I don't think they're going to be bringing a lot of 1st and 2nd down pressures. When they're going to heat him up, to me, is more in obvious passing downs. That's more of when I think you'll see that. But like 1st and 2nd down, play your defense, let your front 4 show what they are, and then be smart about when you bring your pressure. So I would definitely lean towards under on 60 that. Now, if you want to talk about what's the third down blitz percentage, that might be closer to 65%. Good one there. Let's got another from Tyler.
Thank you for the super chat, Tyler. What do you think of Bryce Underwood being named the starter at Michigan? And what is his expectations from you guys? And was this the right move?
I don't know enough about the battle. Like, I know Mikey King was banged up a little bit this summer. Was he even healthy during the battle? I don't know. Without knowing how camp went down, this is just my opinion without having followed it. I always felt like they needed to kind of do with him what Clemson did with Trevor Lawrence. Don't just throw him out there in the first game of the year and say, good luck. You know, especially when you don't, like, the advantage CJ Carr has around him is you have a veteran line, you have talented receivers, you have a great backfield. Michigan's got a really good backfield, but they're very inexperienced at tight end and receiver, and there's, you know, not great there. Offensive line, and what's it going to be? I don't know. You're just kind of throwing him to the wolves. And what if he struggles? What do you do then? You're going to bench him? As opposed to what I thought was brilliant about what Clemson did is Kelly Bryant was their starter, but then they bring Trevor in for a series or two, let him get some experience. And then when you felt he was ready to take over, he took over. That's what I thought they should have done. But at the same time, if you're out there in practice and it's so obvious that he's by far your best quarterback, I understand the desire to want to get him out there. But I just think you have to think long-term with a kid like this. And say, yeah, we could do this, but that's putting a lot of pressure on him. Do you really want to send him into Norman, Oklahoma for his second career start? And it's all on his shoulders. Like, that's asking a lot, as opposed to bringing him off the bench against Oklahoma. And then there's not as much pressure on him. That's where I'm coming from on it, Trevor. But I don't know that I'd say it's a mistake either, because he's incredibly talented. And he is your future. And maybe they think, hey, we're not going to be a championship team anyway this year, so let's just throw them out there.
That's what that move tells me, is that I think the staff has enough awareness of, like, look, this isn't a championship year for us. They're not going to, as much as Michigan fans hope and want them to be, and as much as the AP polls want to try to put them in the top 15 of preseason teams, which I think is pretty lofty. The one difference between the 2018 Clemson game or the 2018 Clemson team is you look at that roster and they were poised to make a run at the championship. It was, hey, got some big games early. Let's get T-Law's feet a little bit wet. And Kelly Bryant was a starter the year before. So little bit difference in circumstances, because like Mikey Keene is like, I mean, he's also a transfer. He has basically spent the same amount of time around the Michigan program that Bryce Underwood has.
Sure.
And so it's like, what difference is it going to make? You might as well get Bryce as much experience as possible to build for 26.
Sure.
That's what that move showed me, because it's whether Mikey Keene starts or Bryce Underwood starts, I don't know if that raises or lowers your odds of beating Oklahoma in Norman. So if I'm the coach, I would rather get Bryce Young that experience early in his career on the road, especially if it's a year where they're not trying to win. Well, not trying to win, but a year where I don't think the expectation should be win a championship. So that's kind of the differentiator between that 2018 Clemson team and the 2025 Michigan team. I think the rosters are just a little bit different. So I don't mind the move. My expectations for him is just learn. That's where I'm at with Bryce Underwood. You don't have to go out and try to put together a Heisman campaign. You don't have to go out and be the next Johnny Manziel guy. Like, look, be you, learn as much as you possibly can, make plays when you can, take what the defense gives you. It's really a lot of what my expectations are out of any first-year starter at a big-time program. Jacob Watson, what are you guys looking for most? What are you guys looking? I'm sorry, Jacob. Give me a second. What are you guys looking for
from
most
Notre Dame,
from Notre Dame to let you know they will compete for a natty?
I think in game one, Trevor, it really just comes down to, like we talked about at the beginning, line play. And that really is it for me. It's line play. Can Notre Dame go into Miami and then 2 weeks later against A&M and say, we can, at the minimum, stalemate on one side of the ball, win on the other side of the ball, and at best, win both sides? Because that's what's going to be what's needed in November and December and January is, like, your line can't get beat the way it did against Georgia. Fortunately for you, your defensive line feasted and you had better athletes. I mean, that's just the reality of it. Like despite what some people tried to tell me beforehand, Georgia did not have better athletes than Notre Dame did. They didn't have better athletes at quarterback. They didn't have better athletes at running back. They didn't have better athletes in the secondary. They didn't have better athletes at linebacker. As good, certainly, but secondary. And you say, well, yeah, they were faster than Notre Dame at receiver, but at least the Notre Dame kids could catch the ball. So I'll give them that.
Yeah.
And so you had better players, but you still got whooped on the offensive line. You got beat on both lines by Penn State in the first half. Now your lines played better in the second half, which then allowed your athletes to take that game over on the perimeter. Your defense locked down their athletes, and your athletes on offense started making plays. But it was a stalemate in the second half of that game in the trenches. And then they got beat in the trenches on both sides of the ball by Ohio State. That's not good enough. You went over with your offensive line against other teams' defensive lines. You went over in those 3 games. Would you agree with that? Over. Your defensive line won a battle, stalemated, lost a battle in those last 3 games. That's not good enough. If you go out there and win the matchups against Miami and A&M, it tells me, okay, they're what we thought they could be. Let's roll.
Yeah, on top of line play, it's just confirmation about the athleticism of this team. We've talked a lot about how this is the most athletic, the most long, list goes on, football team that we've seen Notre Dame have in quite some time. Looking at that relative to some of the other teams that they have on their schedule, the athletes at Texas A&M, the athletes at Miami, the athletes at USC, just where that is comparatively, Jacob, that's going to let me know, okay, this is a team that is poised to make another run at a national title. From Vanilla Chill, Coach Freeman said he went with his gut when choosing CJ. Do you think his head was telling him Minchie and his gut was saying CJ?
I think this tracks with what we were talking about. If he's being genuine there, it's what we talked about. We were told all along that he wanted to go with Kenny for what? Because the turnovers. And I think at the end of the day, he just kind of realized, like, okay, this guy still gives us the higher ceiling. I'm just going to have to kind of live with this for a little bit, knowing that once he works through this and gets experience, I'm going to get more of this over here that I love and less of this over here that I hate. I think that's part of what it was.
Agreed. From Katie Keevers, do you expect the offense to change at all if CJ throws an early interception?
I think the only way the offense changes if he throws an early pick is if it's like it's a wet day and the ball sails and he's not able. Like you watched when Avery Johnson was trying to throw in the rain on Saturday, it was a mess. You're like, dude, you got to change what you're doing. It was a mess. He could not throw in the rain. That's about the only way, Katie. Honestly, look, you have to be careful with the message that you send to CJ Carr, or if it was Kenny Minchie, when they make a mistake and all of a sudden everything changes.
Yeah.
Like that's what Brian Kelly used to do. And that's why you'd see these quarterbacks kind of struggle the longer they were in the system, because they were so afraid of making a mistake that they just stopped making plays. That's just my opinion. The least effective that Ian Book was as a passer was in 2020 for the course of an entire season, because he made less mistakes. I think he only threw 3 picks that year, but he was way less of a playmaker. There were play here, play there, but he was so afraid of making a mistake that he didn't just let it rip. And I've told people for years, Ian Book has a much better arm than people realize. He just wasn't always willing to let her rip, because I think he was so afraid of making a mistake that he's like, I'm just not going to turn it over. Because he's watching Brandon Wimbush get ripped for that. He's watching Phil Dracovic in practice get ripped for that. He's like, I'm not going to. Nope. And I was like, I've said, first year of Ian Book was by far his best year. Dude averaged 300 yards passing in the regular season in 8 starts?
Mm-hmm.
Ended up over 290 for the year. Put up big numbers in 2019 against bad teams, not so good against the good teams. 34 touchdown passes is still an impressive number. And then he throws 15 in his last year. Oh, it's COVID year. They played 12 games. They played 1 or 2 less games than they played any other year. They've never played more than 13 games in a season until this year. So 12 games isn't a whole lot different. threw 15 touchdown passes. Why? Because he just wasn't willing to make mistakes. Because that's what he kind of got beat into him. You got to be careful you don't do that. And so it doesn't mean that you just like, no worries, it's all good, keep throwing them, you'll figure it out. But you can't make these dramatic changes just because he throws an early interception. Just can't do that.
Yeah, Katie, I mean, Notre Dame is still going to be a team that's going to be run focused. I don't want to say run heavy because that can get misconstrued and, oh, cool, CJ's going to throw the ball 3 times in his opening debut. No. Notre Dame is still a team that's going to want to establish and dominate the line of scrimmage. And so if he throws an interception, I don't think that overall changes the game plan too much, barring any sort of extreme weather like what Brian was talking about. From Stephen Imholt, which 4 opponents are most likely to still be in the game after halftime this year? I see the first 2 going along with Arkansas and Boston College. Are there other likely close games?
Stephen, I think there's plenty of potential for teams to be in close games. Like I'm not sitting there predicting like Notre Dame's going to go out there and go 12-0 and 10 of their games are going to be over by the middle of third quarter. I look at it and I'm like, look, Miami could be one. After halftime, Miami, Texas A&M, Boise State, Arkansas, NC State, USC, Pitt, Syracuse, Navy. I mean, honestly, everybody but Purdue or Stanford has a shot to be in the game after halftime. There's good, this we keep telling you guys, there's no elite teams in the schedule this year, but there's a lot of good ones. If Notre Dame has NC State or Pitt or Boston College or any of those teams that we just mentioned in the third quarter where it's over in the third quarter, that means this Notre Dame team is exceptionally good. Like last year was more about they played kind of a weak schedule last year at times for certain stretches and were able to kind of dominate it. But like, look, let's look back to that 2001 Miami team. They had dominant wins. Penn State, Rutgers, Pitt, Florida State was a game in the second half. BC was a game in the second half. Virginia Tech was a game in the second half. That's, like that's what they go. It's 11 games in the regular season. 8 of them were competitive in the second half. 3, that's one of the most dominant teams we've ever seen, ever. So if there's 4 or fewer opponents that are where it's close in the third quarter, that means this Notre Dame team is unbelievably good.
Yeah.
Unbelievably good. And I hope we see that. I would love to see that. That'd be a lot of fun to watch. A lot of fun to watch. Here's one, Trev, from PJC 1122. What did you think of that little QB for Hawaii? Can he last the whole year? We mentioned him a little bit, but didn't talk a lot about it. Trev, what do you think about that?
Do I think he can last the whole year? Not if he keeps getting hit the way that he did in the Stanford game. Look, I mean, it was week 0 and the poor kid was already limping around to finish the game against Stanford. I mean,
and that wasn't the one where he got rolled up on was not the first big hit he took either.
No.
No,
especially because part of his game is being a scrambler.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, honestly, I think that game ends up not being as close if he still had his legs. I truly believe that. That Stanford team is not good, man. And that quarterback was, what was his name? Like Alejandro. Yeah. I mean, he was eating him up with his legs.
I think is what they said. Yeah.
Yeah, he was eating him up with his legs and making passes when he had to. But I mean, what do I think of him? It's a gutsy performance, man. I mean, week 1, you're a redshirt freshman. You're what looked like on screen 5'7", $130. I know he's bigger than that, but I mean, he looked tiny on TV. And that was a gutsy performance. Hung in there against a Power 4 team, albeit it was Stanford. But I mean, still, you hung in there against a Frank Reich coach Stanford team, and you got the win at home after getting rolled up on. And I thought he was going to be done for weeks. I mean, let alone coming back in the next offensive series. So gutsy performance. It was cool to see. From Jay Henry, what do you think the carry split will be for Lyle, and Fletcher?
I'd probably say 65-35, 60-40 would be it. Lyle can be a number one back, but I think he's best off when he's the slasher. Mark Fletcher's a big guy. He's big. He's physical. He's a good athlete for his size. He's your hammer. You know, he can, to me, he can replace Damian Martinez. I don't think that's necessarily going to be like a huge issue in that regard. But, you know, I think he's the guy that can be the bulk carrier. You know, we saw it last year when Martinez was out. You know, we saw even when Martinez came back, he's 11, 13, 15, 12, 13, 12 carries. That's what I think Mark Fletcher is. You know, he's 112 carries, 5.2 per carry. And then you look at Jordan Lyle, who averaged 7.4 yards a carry. It's kind of like, you know, if Notre Dame had, you know, Audric Estime and Jeremiah Love, how they should have been used in 2023. We complained that year that we weren't seeing enough of Jeremiah. Not that Audric wasn't great, but like, dude, like that other kid's pretty flipping good too. You can use him more. And it's that kind of thing. You know, real good, big physical hammer back with a guy that only needs 6 or 7 touches to do damage. And that's the thing about Jordan Lyle. And then if he's hot, then you can give him the ball more. But like, you know, against USF, 6 carries for 104 yards. And against Wake Forest, 7 carries for 115 yards. Like, that's what he's capable of. Now, the thing he's going to have to do, and for all the hype about Jordan Lyle, he had 40 yards against Florida A&M. He had 71 yards against Ball State. He had 104 yards against USF. And he had 115 yards against Wake Forest, who stinks. That's 330 of his 400 yards last year. He went 6 for 18 against Florida, 2 for 2 against Virginia Tech, 2 for 4 against Cal, 1 for 6 against Florida State, 1 for 1 against Duke, 3 for 5 against Syracuse, and 9 for 34, which is 3.8 per carry against Iowa State. And Miami fans are acting like that guy's better than Jadarian Price. Well, maybe he could be, but he certainly didn't show it last year. And so I think Fletcher's the guy that you build your run game around, and then Lyle's your change of pace slasher back. And then Shamar Brown's going to get some of that stuff going as well. So that's how I see it.
Another one from Jacob Watson. If Notre Dame's defense is as good as advertised, if CJ Carr lives up to the hype and has a legit leash, where do you think he ends up by playoff time?
If he lives up to the hype and has the legit leash, where do I think he ends up? I think he ends up as the starting quarterback of one of the 2 or 3 teams that we go into the playoffs saying that team's going to be tough to beat. Mm-hmm. That's what I think. If the defense is as good as advertised, Trevor's prediction of 12-0 has a pretty good chance of happening if also CJ Carr lives up to the hype.
Yep.
Yep.
If both of those things, if both of those projections kind of fulfill themselves, then I'm feeling extremely confident about my regular season and postseason prediction.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd make me happy.
Yeah. Old Jarhead, what is your confidence level in the defensive line being successful against the Miami offensive line?
We actually met Old Jarhead, I believe, before the spring game. He was one of the guys that was there at that little meet and greet. So it's great to meet you there. What's the confidence level? I'm extremely confident they're capable of doing it. It's hard to have a confidence level really in anything with any sort of definitiveness behind it because we just haven't seen this team play yet. Yeah. But I'm confident, like I'm extremely confident that if the Notre Dame D-line plays their game, they will win the battle against the Miami offensive line. They're not going to dominate the way they did Georgia because Miami's line is better than the one they faced against Georgia. But you know, I think it could be, you know, a performance where you're like, boy, that defensive line was like, it could look like the Georgia game, even though it's a better offensive line, but I think this is also a better defensive line because you do have Boubacar back, you do have Patojo back, you do have Bryce Young in year 2, you know, Burnham and Junior are back. You got Onye where you didn't have him last year. You got Jared Dawson, you didn't have him last year. Howard Cross is basically playing on one leg in that game. You still went out and dominated Florida. They're capable of doing that. I'm not predicting it because that'd be a heck of a performance, but they're capable of it. But if
Mhm.
they play their game, they will win this battle. It won't be, I don't think, crazy dominant. Could be, but I don't think it will be. But I think they win the game, and Carson Beck has a couple big mistakes because of the pressure, and that helps Notre Dame win the football game. I'm very confident that they're capable of that. But until I actually see this defensive line play together, it's hard for me to really say that I have a lot of confidence in anything other than what they're capable of at this point in time.
Agreed. Christopher Hardy, what outside of Notre Dame Miami is your must-see game of the week?
I mean, is there any other game? I mean, there's two for me, but there's one in particular. It's Texas Ohio State. But I'm also very much looking forward to the Clemson LSU game also. Like those two games. There's actually if I could only watch one game, it'd probably be Texas and Ohio State. But I'm very curious to see Syracuse and Tennessee. To a much even more degree, I'm very curious to see Alabama at Florida State. Very much looking forward to that game. I'm very much looking forward to LSU against Clemson. I mean, I think that's the kind of game that has like major implications on the postseason, how conferences are viewed, who's going to make the playoff, some SEC jockeying come November. And then another one that people aren't talking about that's happening on Sunday is a Sunday or Monday? It is Sunday, is the Virginia Tech South Carolina game. I want to see South Carolina because I think they've got a chance to be really good, but I also have some major questions about them, which is why I don't have them ranked as high as some other people. But this is a Virginia Tech team that's got some legit athletes and it's got a pretty good quarterback. What's their front seven going to look like after losing, Kyle Kennard and is Dylan Stewart take that big year two jump like I think he will? Is Lenore Sellers going to be break out? All these type of things. I want to see that game as well. But the Ohio State, Texas, LSU, or Clemson are the two big ones for me, Trev.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, it's hard not to say all of it for me. I'm just happy football's back. I was talking about it a couple of weeks ago. I mean, I got all the guys coming over on Saturday. It's a full slate of football. College game day. It's like Lee Corso's last headgear pick and all that stuff. And so we're getting some food catered in. It's going to be a good day. But if I had to just pick a game, I would probably say Ohio State, Texas. I don't know how you can't pick that game, but very interested to see how the entire slate works, man. That LSU Clemson game, I think, could be some fireworks. I really do. That game could be nuts. But yeah, it's that Saturday slate's going to be electric. From AVO Entertainment, which tight end lives up to Notre Dame's expectations?
I think the guy with the best chance is the guy that Trevor's been talking about all offseason, Eli Raridan. I mean, he's got big-time talent. It's just, can he stay focused, be consistent, and stay healthy? But he's got big-time talent, Trev. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, his ceiling is exceptionally high. He has all the physical tools, and he's kind of a microcosm of a lot of this Notre Dame team. All the ingredients are there. All the tools are there. Now you just got to go out and do it. So it's definitely Eli Raridan for me, AVO. From the Law Dog, did hearing what Coach Marcus Freeman said about the defensive line excite you tremendously? And one name I didn't hear, Cole Mullins.
I mean, he's not going to go through and list every guy on the depth chart. So I don't put a lot in that. But I don't think Cole Mullins is going to be a guy that's going to play 30 snaps in the opener anyway. So I don't worry about that. But it's like, okay, yeah, if that's how things are shaping up, because how we are, Trev. It's like, I like PCs. We got to report on them, but it's like coach is going to go out there and give away all of his secrets on Tuesday before a Sunday game. Hey, Miami guys, just want to let you guys know this is where we're good. If you want to come at us, this might be the way to do it. We're kind of not worried about that right now. That's not going to happen. But if what he's saying is legitimate, then sure, sounds great. Like, yeah, I'm fired up. I'm absolutely fired up. Trev, do you know much about the specifics of the $300 million donation at Kansas?
I don't.
I just know, I don't know specifics of it, but I just love the fact that there's somebody as part of that program that's willing to spend some money.
Yeah.
Because I think Kansas with Lance Leopold has a chance to be a pretty good Big 12 program, like consistently a bowl team that occasionally has that team that can threaten to win the league.
Yeah.
There's no doubt. I mean, there's not a ton of talent in Kansas, but there's some. I mean, heck, Notre Dame went into Kansas to get one of the best players they have in their class in 2026. Last year there was a stud tight end that Notre Dame really liked from Kansas. He went to K-State. So, my point is where you're located, you can recruit Illinois, you can recruit Iowa, which has talent, you can recruit Missouri that has talent, you can recruit Texas that has a lot of talent, you can go out to California and get talent. Like, yeah, you got to travel, but you can recruit there to a degree if you've got money. That's going to be the key. If you've got people willing to support the program, because this is a coach, in my opinion, Lance Leopold, that if you give him talent, he's going to win because he's a heck of a football coach. So I think it's cool. I think it's great. And they're doing a renovation, not a new stadium, because that would cost a lot more money, kind of like what Notre Dame did. They didn't build a new stadium. They just $400 million renovation. But I think it's great. I hope that program continues to get support like that, because it's one of those I used to like Kansas. Like, I was always a Michigan basketball fan growing up, but I always liked Kansas under Roy Williams. I just did. I just don't know what it was, but just like that football. I still remember the Rafe LaFrentz, Paul Pierce days, Jacques Vaughn. I mean, they had some dudes back in the day now, and they were a fun team to watch. I don't, me, with any team that's got red, white, and blue colors, I'm going to have watching, but I just like the program. I think Lance Leopold's a heck of a coach. So I think it's awesome. It's great.
Hope they keep winning, man. FanDuel has their over-under win totals at 7.5 right
Love
now.
it.
And based on how they looked against Fresno State, I wouldn't be too upset about taking the over on that one. That's
but Kansas went 5-7 last year, and FanDuel has them at 7.5 over/under. Why? Because there's a lot of faith in that coach. That's why. Obviously, Jalen Daniels is part of it, but there's people that recognize this guy's a good football coach.
Yep.
And they look at how many games that they lost last year where you're like, yeah, healthier Kansas team probably wins that football game. They were pretty beat up last year.
Yep.
So that's part of it as well.
From Tristan Schaup, what is the most effective way to stop the run?
Several things. However you go about it, gap discipline is key. That doesn't mean you got to two gap. If you're shooting gaps, you have to have gap discipline. You have to be physical at the point of attack, front and second level. You have to be. You have to have smart safety fits, right? So the safeties are know how to come down and properly fit off running backs. You've got to have great block destruction, and you've got to tackle well and be able to get to the ball quickly. And then the last thing is you have to have speed. That matters. Look, power goes a long way, but if you have power but you can't run, then what's going to happen to you is kind of what happened to Georgia last year. For the most part, Georgia was able to shut Notre Dame down, but when Notre Dame was able to make some very important plays, setting up their first field goal drive, what happened? Great athlete makes a great cut, and they couldn't catch him. That led to Notre Dame tying the game up. When Notre Dame was able to put the game away, what happened? They couldn't get to the perimeter against Notre Dame's athletes. Not just Riley Leonard, but Jordan Faison as well. And so you've got to be able to run too, beat them to the spot. That's what made that. There were several times in 2017 where I'm like, I think Notre Dame's got the edge on that. And then Raekwon Smith was like, whoa, just close it up. You're like, okay, don't got the edge. You're not getting the edge today. Like, you just good luck. That ain't happening. And I think speed is important too. Can you get to the spot? You can know what to do and know how to get there. But if you're running a 4.8 and that running back's running a 4.4, you may be a second late getting there. Like Joe Schmidt's a perfect example. Post-injury, this is after the injury. Joe Schmidt's brilliant football player, brilliant young man, tough as nails. He just couldn't get there as quickly as he could before. And that was the difference between, him being in the hole and tackling the guy for a 3-yard loss and him not getting the hole in time and the guy running off through his arm tackle for a big game. So those to me are the big keys. Gap discipline, being physical at the point of attack, resetting the line of scrimmage in your favor, block destruction, being sound tacklers, and being sound on the back end of the defense. I think one of the most underrated parts of a great run defense is you have a secondary that's smart and can tackle. Big part of it. Then we have this one here from Irish Gordian Knott.
How different do you think Heatherman's game plan will be for the Notre Dame game compared to his game plan when he was at Minnesota He coached against Penn State.
I watched that game. Don't quite remember what the game plan was. So I honestly, IGK, don't know that I could tell you enough about it. I know that they did a pretty great job shutting down the Penn State run game. I do know that. I couldn't tell you why. I didn't break that game down. That's on my to-do list these next couple days. There's a lot of Minnesota film waiting there to be broken down, but I got to finish these Notre Dame breakdowns first. But look, the big thing with Heatherman last year, Trev, that I liked about him in general from the games I watched, and not specific to a team game plan. Here's what I can tell you about why I think they were effective last year against Penn State without getting into specific game plan stuff. They were a sound defensive football team that were physical, played smart. And smart isn't just knowing where to go. It's the proper angle, how to get there. If you look at the ability of their, what did I just get done saying? An underrated part of a great defense is secondary players who can tackle. Kerry Brown, Coy Parrish, both very good tacklers last season. They were a very smart football team. They were a disciplined football team. They kept everything in front of them. And they just didn't give up a lot of big plays. I mean, that was really the big thing when you look at their rush defense last year, Trev, is they just weren't a team that consistently, gave up a lot of big plays. And that's something that made them a good football team, and I think if they can do that, I think they're going to have a chance to be a pretty good rushing team again. And so I'm actually going to pull this up here real quick. Last year, they gave up 13 runs of 20 yards or more in 13 games. That's one a game. They only gave up 5 runs all year of 30 yards or more. That's it. That's pretty good. They didn't give up a single run last year of, they didn't give up a single run last year of 50 yards or more. Not one. Gave up only 2 of 40. That's very good. So I think that's where a lot of that improvement was, and that's kind of where the success needs to be this year. And then if they can do that, I mean, the year before they gave up 4 runs of 650 yards or more the year before. They got 2 runs of 60 yards or more, 1 run of 70 yards or more, 6 runs of 40 yards or more. It's a dramatic improvement. It's just don't give up the big play. Play downhill, play smart, know your assignment, tackle, get off blocks. Yeah. That's the key. That's what I saw when I watched them last year. There wasn't a lot going over their head or going past them.
Robert Bishop, seems like most offensive coordinators like to be up in the box rather than the sidelines. Do you think that puts Mike Denbrock at a disadvantage for not being able to see how the defense is lined up?
No, because there's a reason. Why are most coaches up there? It's because that's where they're most comfortable. And why Mike Denbrock's not being told to be on the sideline.
Yeah.
He's choosing to be on the sideline. There's a couple reasons why. One of the guys up in the box is Gino Guidugli, someone he's worked with for years. They worked together at Cincinnati, I think, for 4 years. This will be now year 2 together at Notre Dame. He trusts that when Gino tells him this is what Gino's also a former Power 5 quarterback, or he played quarterback at the University of Cincinnati. So there's obviously trust there. Because I've always found when a coach is up in the box, there's a lot of reasons why. One of them could be, I don't trust the guys up there to tell me what I'm seeing. That's when you have to up in the box. He trusts the guys up in the box to tell him what he's seeing. I also think that to say not being able to see how the defense is lined up, you can see how the defense is lined up. I mean, it's not like you can't see football from the sideline. It's just a different angle. You may not be able to see like how the corner on the opposite side of the field is lined up, but trust me, you can see plenty from the sideline. I was on the sideline and up in the box at different times in my career. And then the other thing is you don't just stand right at the line of scrimmage. Mike Denbrock's usually behind the offense a little bit or behind the defense a little bit, so he can see those type of things. But you also trust the communication from your other coaches. And you have coaches looking at different things. Joe Rudolph is not checking out, the what leverage is the cornerback to the field playing against the Z receiver. He's watching the lines. Gino Guidugli's probably not looking at like what's the technique of the nose tackle playing. Like you've got different guys looking at different things, right? So you're going to have Harris Biven looking at certain things. You're going to have Rob Delaney looking at certain things. That's the O-line GA. You're going to have Joe Rudolph looking at certain things. Mike Brown's going to be looking at certain things. And that's where the communication is coming from. Now, it's not 6 guys yelling everything's at you. There's a process as a staff you put in place of who's talking, who's when. So, like, as soon as the play is over, you have a coach who's looking at the sideline to see what personnel they run onto the field. And then as soon as they make a change, he's like, nickel, 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 or, so-and-so's in, or whatever things that they determined part of the game plan were important information for Mike Denbrock to have. Everybody else kind of needs to not be talking during that. And it'll be like, hey, Joe, what's going on here? Hey, this is what they're doing. Let's do this. There's constant communication, that structured communication that they've talked about. This is what I want to know and when I want to know it. And so I think he has a feel down. He feels comfortable down in the field, seeing the action. And the other part of it is you want to be able to talk to the guys in person when they come off the field too. And especially now that you got the tablets, I think it makes it easier as a coordinator because you can actually watch plays now. I think they show the whole play now. It's not just the screenshots. You can watch the whole play now, correct? Isn't that the new rule?
I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. I have to look into that, but I'm pretty sure with the tablets, you can now watch the whole play. It's not just looking at screenshots. So, because remember the NFL used to be screenshots. You could look at screenshots. And I believe with the tablets, you can look at all of it. So I think that's important. I think that's helpful for a coordinator to now be able to look, hey, Gino's telling me this. Well, I just watched those 2 plays. You kept telling me the safety's doing this, and he ain't doing that. Or you can say like, yeah, okay, I trust that guy. So that's kind of where I'm coming from on that one. So I think that's it. Look, I've said this before. I was a box guy, but it wasn't just because I could see everything. I would get a little bit too intense on the field. The box helped calm, chill, relax, and so I think that is something that helped me up there. Some coaches don't like being up in the box. They want to be down in the mix of things. They want to see what the energy's like. They want to be able to see, certain things that you can't really see from the box. And so it's a preference thing. There's not one's better, one's worse. Lincoln Riley's, we talk about how Lincoln Riley's a great coordinator. He calls all those plays from the sideline. Always has. So Rich Rodriguez back in the day when he was calling plays I know Calvin McGee was listed as the OC, but Rich Rod was calling plays from the sideline. Clark Lee was a sideline guy. No, he was a box guy. Al Golden was a sideline guy. Marcus Freeman was a sideline guy. So it's just there's no right or wrong. It's what are you most comfortable with? The only wrong answer is if you're doing something you're not comfortable with. That's it. And then here's the last one, Trev, from Irish in Florida.
CJ seems like a pretty steady guy mentally. Do you see this the same way? Seems like he won't let the moment get to him and will use the talent around him to win without trying to do too much.
Oh, I don't know about the last part. I think CJ is a smart kid. I think CJ's got some intensity that people don't maybe recognize because he seems so calm all the time. You see him at games. He's kind of got that face of just he's just kind of focused. But we've seen it in practice. He's got some intensity to him. One of the things that we heard from sources was no, CJ's the more vocal leader. There's no doubt about that. And I think that is something that you need to harness a little bit. Hey, let's chill out. Relax. We got this. So I could see there being a little bit of him being too amped up. Remember Brady Quinn was that way. I felt like in 05 and 06, I felt like Brady Quinn was going to sail a ball early or drive one into the ground because he was so amped up. And he kind of had to – you'd see a lot of games, some of his first throws in games were just coming out, throwing a now screen, just where Charlie's like, let's calm him down because Brady was an intense guy. And you have to know guys like that. And so when I look at CJ Carr, I do concern myself a little bit with a guy that was in a position battle, was getting a lot of negativity from certain parts of the fan base, feeling like I got to go show everybody why I got the job, and then pressing a little bit too much. You have to guard against that as a football coach when you're Mike Denbrock. and with your play calling, but then also how you kind of communicate to him during game. Like, we're fine, relax. But at the same time, if he's an intense guy, you still want him to keep that intensity. You just want to make sure it's channeled in the right and positive directions. And I think it will be. He's an experienced kid. I mean, yeah, not in college, but he's been playing quarterback a long time. He's been around Power 5 football for a long time. And so I think he'll be okay. But I think he's a smart, steady guy mentally, but I think that doesn't mean he's not intense and won't press a little bit early. I'd be shocked if he doesn't press a little bit early.
Yeah.
Because that's just kind of what young quarterbacks tend to do, especially ones that kind of have his attitude and his ego, which is a good thing. You don't want a quarterback that's like, I don't know, I'm okay, I guess. I'm just thankful to be here. And he actually believes that. Like, that's not the guy I want leading my team. I want the guy that's like, let's roll, son. Like, I got you. Let's do this. I'm going to make this play. I'm going to make this throw. And then you just got to harness that. That's going to be the key. So that's where I'm at, Trev.
Same page over here. Well, listen, folks, that's going to do it for us here today on the Irish Breakdown podcast. We will be back tomorrow to go over more of this game prep. Brian and I will be back
We'll
at
dive
1
into more
p.m.
of the matchup part tomorrow. Yeah, man.
It's all the more reason to be subscribed to this channel. It's all the more reason to have that notification bell hit on your way out of here. Please be sure to hit that like button. And then whatever streaming platform you listen to us on, we would greatly, greatly appreciate a 5-star review. It helps with the algorithm, all that stuff that's just way above my head and above my pay grade. But make sure that you are sharing this podcast with your friends and family.
Putting all the pressure on me for that one? Is that what we're doing here?
Pressure on you
no, you said it's above my pay grade, so that would be me.
Oh.
It's just a little joke. I just like razzing you at the end of shows, Trev, getting you out of your flow.
No, you're good, man. It's fine. It's okay. It's all right. Where was I? Like, subscribe. No, I'm just kidding. So listen, folks, be sure to like, subscribe, share.
You threw me off, man. I had it all ran down. I was almost ready. I got to start all over again. And we're talking about algorithms and above my pay grade. Oh, that's right. I was talking about 5-star reviews and signing up for the message.
I'm just going to start tweaking at some point. Welcome back to the Irish Breakdown podcast. I'm just going to reset at some point. I'm going to go back to I'm going to go back to the start of the show. Now, listen, guys, be sure you subscribe to the premium
store for you guys today.
Brian, thank goodness it's game week. Listen, folks, make sure that you are subscribed to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Be sure to check out IB Nation Sports Beat. They're going live tonight here, a little bit over a half an hour. They're going to be breaking down some of the comments today from Marcus Freeman's press conference. So until tomorrow at 1 p.m., that's Brian. I'm Trevor. We'll see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.